So it is 10 o'clock and I'll call the meeting to order. Can we get somebody to, please?
I think everybody is here except for Pete.
He is not, he's in a Board of Health meeting.
Okay. Pete. Alan it today, and then just missing Jim Atkins.
Y'all keep Ryan in your thoughts. He lost his mother-in-law a day or so ago. She was a really, really wonderful lady. Blake has resigned off the commission in Region 6. He's no longer a council member, and I've talked about replacing him, and that's going to be done in the next few weeks before our next. I think it's first next month, so that will help. So we have a quorum. Blake doing good days and bad days. Not all I can say. He's doing a little bit better. I think now he's kind of rallied. He still maintains a position as an EMA director in the county coroner. So work that he does, but he's still got some challenges. Approval of the minutes. Y'all got the minutes electronically. Approve them.
Motion to approve.
Motion.
Second.
So I am going to point out something that I'm not sure what, I'm just going to point it out. Page 2, the last sentence there. If a patient gets taken to another, they still have the responsibility to take care of them, which also highlights the trauma center.
System.
Well, no, I don't think the sentence is wrong. I just don't know who they are. Page 2.
The hospital. Where?
At the bottom, if a patient gets taken to a non-designated center, they still have the responsibility to take care. Highlights the importance of an inclusive trauma center.
No.
The
Hospital that's a
non-designated hospital, we still have a requirement to take care.
Non-designated trauma center, they still, the non-designated trauma center has a responsibility to take care. You want it rephrased?
No. I would at least realize that EMS, and if you take them to the local hospital and drop them off and leave, and they don't have, then we don't have an inclusive trauma system. I recognize that every hospital, when they get there, they have a response. I really don't believe that to take someone to and drop them off, it relieves them of the responsibility. Maybe the only one in the room who thinks that, but that's how I think. Any amendments, I was just pointing that out. So we have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor, aye. Any objection, same sign? Minutes are approved.
On the phone, maybe we need to pause for people because we.
Anyone on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll declare the minutes. Georgia Trauma Commission update, Liz.
It's our, the legislative session did not get, FY24 budget did not get approved until the final day of session. So it went down to, there was an attempt to pull $692,000 from the commission's dedicated. That caused quite a bit of a stir. Thank you for shaking some trees for us, Courtney. Thankfully, that was put back in. It just goes to show you that even when your money is dedicated and you have a trial at the will of the legislators. So hopefully it seemed like posturing that happened as a result of the WellStar system. So we're over that hump. The commission, however, it has really delayed budget, and we have 35 centers now. We have a lot of initiatives going on. We have a 80 page hit, and we have a lot of things to do. So 23 million is a lot, but it doesn't go very far when you and we still don't have every trauma center included in the funding. And we have recruitment of additional trauma centers. So this has brought to light, and please jump in, Courtney, if you want to. Dr. Ashley estimates somewhere around 80 to 100 million annually is what it's going to take to bring everybody in, actually make a den, so we can be inclusive, but not start money. The more centers we bring in, it just reduces the amount for everybody else. So that doesn't really help. Historic centers, $12,000 a year. And I say to the level fours, I'm not sure I level 4 for $12,000. That just doesn't make any sense. So we did increase fours as well as the level 3s because they have been on this amount since the inception of funding in 2000. So Dr. Ashley's ask for this group is that if we legislators and say we need $100 million and EMS $12–15 million, what will happen with that money? What's the plan? So we need to come up with a plan for how that money would be used. Ideally, Courtney and I were just talking about one of the placeholders that we put here was we have been talking with UGA doing a study. Originally, it tied into that time to definitive care that we're trying to understand a little bit better, particularly for patients who go to a non-trauma center, have to go for higher level of care. It's going to take us a minute to connect all those dots to have data at our fingertips. And one of the things I never considered was that now that Georgia has a payer claims database and will soon have an all payer claims database, when you follow the money, you can get to where patients are going. So, so there's the potential, and UGA has already done that for behavioral health patients. So we've engaged them to see, could they do that? In addition, now the conversation has sort of turned to, and Courtney and I was talking about that, could the conversation turn to, could we use UGA to help us figure out what is the cost of like readiness and uncompensated care? Because that's in the law, actually. That's in the code that created the commission, that trauma centers and EMS get funding for readiness and uncompensated care. For those of you who've been around a long time, you remember the days of the ambulance, or the vehicle grant replacement grants. You remember a lot of different mechanisms that were attempted to sort of fill that gap. So, but well, bless you. But I think what we're lacking is some data to support what does that big number look like. We have published several studies on the trauma center side about readiness, and we have data for the 1s and 2s on what uncompensated care. Just to give you an example, like Augusta University, their uncompensated care claims for the fiscal year that we just evaluated was $30 million. That's just one trauma center, and they're kind of middle of the road for uncompensated care. We don't even ask for 3s and 4s when we know they're still providing uncompensated care. So it would be nice to understand what that would look like for EMS and how, again, the code doesn't say that the commission reimburses dollar for dollar, but ideally there's some mechanism to compensate EMS on the readiness side and non-compensated care side. So just some food for thought, and maybe something we could put a work group together around to take a look, because we do have researchers really chomping at the bit. This is right up their alley. They're economists, healthcare economists at heart, and they love this kind of stuff. But that was Dr. Ashley's ask for this group, is to figure out how would another windfall of money, whether it was a one-time or an ongoing sustainable, what the money would be used for. And then, as I alluded to, the ACS consultative report, I just had a meeting with them on Monday to review some edits. So I'm expecting the final report within the next week or so. There were just really minor changes, just some minor clarifications, some things that I think weren't clear in the pre-review questionnaire. We've had a couple of our tech transitions, and Scott, thankfully, you're about to get a brand new minted RTech coordinator. Jay Connolly from Piedmont Henry has agreed to serve as the Region 4 RTech coordinator. He's no stranger to the region, the system. So
Yeah, he actually came to our region council meeting the other day.
good.
So it's good, and he got to meet the trauma manager for the other two region 4s in our group. So they're really, eager and have a lot of energy to work with. So we're very grateful.
Outstanding. Very happy about that. And then on Tuesday, we have some interviews for Region 9. So hopefully we'll get that position, and then they will all be filled. In addition, we, you may or may not know, but Crystal Smith from Region 5 has been named to the American College of Surgeons Committee on Trauma as the Georgia Stop the Bleed champion. And we have contracted with Greg Nickel. He's also in Region 5 to serve as sort of a coordinator, almost like pushing the papers around a lot, because you guys may or may not know, but the commission, it was almost 9 months ago, Courtney, they approved a plan where we extended the Stop the Bleed training and kit distribution to other public entities outside of school systems. So I think we're going to open that application period back up.
Yeah, and you all decided on May 1st.
And then they take applications, we review applications, and then they get distributed to the coordinators. And it's great. We've had a lot of like law enforcement apply, and different colleges, et cetera. So I think that'll really be helpful, and hopefully get the kits and the training supplies out to your regions as needed. And then finally, very exciting, we've begun work on building what will be our statewide dashboard. Marie Probst, April Moss, who's the new Deputy Director for Systems of Care, and myself and Gina, we're working with our multiple databases to look over time since I think we started with 2019, and looking at some metrics that we can track through to see. That was one of the things that came right away from the ACS visit, is that we have all these databases and point and click and biospatial and ESO and arbormetrics, but can anybody access it anywhere? No. I mean, if it's not in a way that's easily digestible for the public to see, what are the important metrics? Are we getting better? Or are we getting worse? So we're building something that hopefully we could unveil by maybe August. That's it, Gordon. Unless there's any questions.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So the 30 million short of funding that Augusta reported, Augusta University, is that retail?
I don't know. Commission uses a third-party auditor to adjudicate uncompensated care claims.
So is your question, is that cost or?
Correct.
Yeah, and
Because I think that would play a big role in how we focus on doing reimbursement of uncompensated care. And the expectation to reimburse at retail, I think, would be really stretching the limits on it.
a bridge too far.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up though, because UGA, they, if somebody has a really strong billing department, they would love a contact to be able to understand what some of the billing codes and things like that for EMS are, because they're more familiar on the hospital side, less familiar on EMS side.
There's a
So
lot less for EMS.
does anybody want to
It's
volunteer?
basically you get paid or you don't. That's the two.
I'll get you,
It's usually the latter.
billing companies.
I will give you a number for our lady who does it manual, and we're paying her some of this grant money to help with trauma anyway.
Okay.
Another one, I know Huey and them do a good job. Terry Cobb, his people are excellent.
And it would be nice to have a
Yeah.
mix of fire-based, private, and, county or hospital-based, so that would be very helpful.
The other
We can help with this.
Yeah.
Okay,
The other piece is to get some folks who, our primary payer source is mileage code.
mhm.
And I don't know that that's the same for everybody. And, so we actually get more money in for mileage because of and the nature of what we do. So that may be different from some others.
And they're coming, the commission meeting is May 25th. And they are going, the UGA, at least one of the researchers from the UGA is coming to the meeting just to kind of hear and get a little bit closer to understanding about trauma. And we wanted to kind of just chat with them a little bit afterwards. So if you can make sure I have, ideally it'd be nice to have their number before then so they could take some time to set up like a phone call and just explore. That'd be great.
So questions before I jump in on, because at our annual meeting or the last meeting we had, Dr. Ashley, we ate lunch together and he did indeed propose, if we get additional funding, what would we do with the EMS money to improve the performance of EMS in caring for trauma patients? We can say, how would we spend it? I'm interested in how we spend it, but the goal needs to be, how do we improve trauma care? And where do we focus the money? And I still get calls on a fairly routine basis and talked to some last week about rural centers or rural hospitals who have desperate times in getting patients out from their hospital to a trauma center. And that's why I brought that point up. Because we talk about a trauma system, but if you don't have transportation from the small centers or from the small hospitals or the rural communities to the level 1 and 2 centers, then I would make the argument that you don't have a trauma system.
So Courtney, I don't disagree with you on those, because we
Would you
hear
want
it too. No, I really don't. When you drill into them, because I know they're one off. So if they're calling you about one, there's probably another one that's happened to it. Fair enough. So how do you quantify that? I'm not disagreeing with it. But I'm trying to, how do you equate it to numbers where it's 1% or it's 20% of those coming from outlying facilities? And how do you quantify the delay was actually detrimental? Because in some cases you can have a resource and you can say it can be there in 45 minutes. Well, they want it there now, but that 45 minutes didn't really make a difference. Now, granted, now in 5 o'clock today probably does make a big difference. We've all been on those transfers, whether it's STEMI, stroke, cardiac trauma, that they got to go. You get there and it's an hour and a half before you leave the ER. So, we remember those just like they remember, I couldn't get an ambulance now, basically. So how do you, again, I don't disagree. I know it's happening, but how do you quantify it and say, oh, it's only happening in, I'm gonna pick on Scott. It's only happening in region 4, which I don't think is what they're doing, but it's only happening in region 4. Okay, what's unique about region 4? Well, they don't have as many trauma centers as region 3 does, or y'all's region, where you're sitting right in the middle of 3 level 1s, but they're almost equal distance, if I remember correctly.
So it's a great point, and Liz and I have been having conversations back and forth with Nita Ham, and we're trying to craft it's part of the March Paul's initiative. We're trying to craft a survey to go out to rural hospitals on trying to quantify that what they perceive their need is.
Right.
And indeed, for small rural hospitals, if they got a trauma there, for some reason, trauma's the only thing that nuts up a small rural hospital more than trauma is an OB fixing to deliver. They just go.
I think that's a fair comment.
They go bonkers.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment.
But trauma oftentimes something you can't see, can't put your finger on, can't put a machine on it to measure it. So I think you bring a good point of, I don't know how to measure that. I think the fact that when a CEO holds up his cell phone in our meeting and Callaway Gardens and said, "I got an aortic aneurysm in my ER that's been there 5 hours waiting on somebody to take him." You know, that gets my attention.
And see, and I don't question that. My first thought is, yeah, why didn't they fly them?
Yeah.
And it may be because it was pouring down rain at point A or point B, or in between, I don't know.
The aortic aneurysm probably would have been better to fly,
Right.
but again, when you have them thunderstorms out there.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot of variables.
let me ask this question, and I know we're focused on trauma. But are these hospitals having the same issues with kidneys and strokes?
I think
Are
so.
their services just dropping off because they're the closest, and then now it's your problem to figure out where they need to go?
The ones I'm
Because-
talking to, yes, they're having that for everything.
So is that where, because I think we're all smart. But to me, that's where, and I don't know if it's appropriate to use money from the trauma commission for stuff like this, but is that where UGA or Carl Vinson Institute or somebody like that could actually help us crunch that? What data do they need to determine, hey, this really is a problem, or no, it's a problem, but it's less than 1% of the time?
Yeah, and I think that's something that we're talking about them helping us figure out. Because you can't, if you just throw in, that's my point, you can't just throw money at something
Right.
unless you have some kind of idea, a pretty darn good
Right.
idea, that if we put money into it, we'll get a decent return on our investment.
Right.
And the return on investment, in public safety is hard to quantify. You know, you hear these people to save one life. Well, let's face it, you spend $10 million to save one life, you can't do that very often.
Right.
So, but we got to have a system of transportation so that patients don't, because when I went and talked to the Georgia Hospital, Rural Group, Georgia Hospital Association, when I talked about this issue, everybody in the room says we got this issue. I mean, it's even with us in Emmanuel County, it's a hospital based. We have trouble sometimes getting them out just because we don't have staff. And we have the policy that if it's the last ambulance in the county and it's a trauma stroke STEMI, then that last ambulance leaves the county and takes care of the emergency that is there versus the emergency that might come up 20, 30 minutes later.
And I think that's gonna be the argument. I mean, to me, I think probably maybe something we should look to do is maybe come up with best practices, but we're not gonna be able to force the services that think that we are only doing 911 in our county and we don't leave our county for any reason. We go to I mean, there's services out there, but that's their mindset.
Yeah.
And you're never gonna change that. I think that's where you have to come up with best practices to show what's best for patient outcomes. And then it's gonna be a local decision on whether they wanna operate in that manner or if they wanna operate in their shell of our ambulances don't leave our county, you go to our local hospital, and that's all we're gonna do.
And to a certain extent, I don't disagree. But I don't want to give people money if they don't take care of trauma patients.
Well, again, that's where you can come up with best practices, and if you expect to get equipment grants and stuff from the trauma commission, then you're gonna operate by best practices, not by your locals.
And I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree with the concept. But if you're running an ambulance service in Clark County with a level 2 trauma center, where are you gonna take your trauma?
I agree, I understand.
So if you're running one in Telfair County, where do you take your trauma? It makes a difference financially, infrastructure.
If I'm running one in Rockdale County, where am I taking my trauma patients? Because they're not gonna go to the local hospital, they refuse to accept it.
Yeah.
So, you know,
So that's why I hope UGA can do this, can objectively look at it, because I don't objectively look at it. I mean, I honestly don't.
Is anything shaken out from any of the CQI committees on the hospital side? That I'm not questioning you, but I mean, are you hearing the same thing through y'all's CQI on the non-designated or the level 3s trying to get to 2s and 1s?
We're hearing some frustration about, yes, some of it is EMS, some of it is acceptance. You know,
Right.
so really, the only one I know Piedmont Walton is currently looking like they're doing a big project where they're looking at, because that, none of that is registry data. So
Right.
it's really picking out those pieces apart when phone calls were made, what was communicated, and, that's not always, a secretary may be making the phone calls and you don't know, does it get documented in the chart when you're going back trying to, look at that. So I think we do have some work on the hospital side to kind of look at what those delays are and try to bucket them.
We at least do have a data point on like time to decision of transfer, and then there could be a gap that is anything. If somebody forgot to call, or somebody called 10 people and waited for somebody to get back to say they accepted, or then they called 10 providers to see if they could transport.
But is that only on the designated centers that are capturing that?
Yes, that's just.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if they're at Dodge County Hospital and they're trying to figure out, which Macon would most likely be the one for that, unless there's
Yeah.
just something crazy going
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
But if Dodge County is having trouble transferring, you wouldn't know that through any normal recourse of CQI review or anything, would you? And that
They
goes for
should-
every other,
They should review it on their end. If the patient didn't get out of Dodge County in timely fashion, they should follow up. Some of the,
Follow up with who?
with the hospital and find out, was the time, was it that they didn't get the patient for a while? Did it take too long to make the decision? They should do, it's the designated trauma center's responsibility to do performance improvement
No,
review.
I know that. I just think GHA's got to get involved in this because, and it needs to be every hospital in the state.
Well, and that's where your non-designated centers have a role in your RTACs, but it is so hard to get them to participate. And
So-
they don't want to do that, but that's where your RTACs should be looking at, that's a cycle where those hospitals who are
Right.
non-designated can feedback to the designated centers in the region, what, hey, we're having, like, it's taken you an hour to tell us you're gonna take our patients.
Right.
That was
So-
written all over our ACS report, I can tell you. We're an exclusive system. We only talk about patients who made it to the trauma center. We have no sightline in what happens to trauma patients that are cared for outside of trauma centers, other than the one study we do every 10 years with the discharge data set.
so let me throw something on the wall and see if it sticks anyway. Would there be any benefit? I mean, I love the way y'all do the sign-in stuff. Is there any way to do something like that that's easy to review the data on the backside that,
I think it's not like the armband project that.
well, I
we
was
have
just thinking
going
that
on.
where the hospital would just do a report, a simple, if you need, you ask 5 things, if you need 5 more, you call and ask them, you know what I'm saying? Or maybe you ask for 10, I don't know. Y'all would have to think through that because it's not to create just a ton of data, but if Dodge County, and I'll just pick on them because I don't know they have any problems, but if Dodge County has a problem that once the patient's out of the ER, that person or the administrator, whoever's appropriate in that facility knows I can go to this site and I can plug in these 5 data reports. Nothing's going to happen immediately, but we're building a database to see that, and I don't think this is a problem, but Region 5 is identifying an issue in this quadrant that they're having trouble transferring. Or, and you dig into it, you say, okay, there were 10 incidents in a quarter. Well, on 5 of those, air couldn't fly because weather. All right, so not a complete legitimate answer, but it's a legitimate reason why they couldn't do it. You don't know ground because you don't know where they called. Or maybe on all 10 of them, they took 2 hours to transfer because they couldn't find a ground service that would do it. Basically, well, why aren't you flying? Oh, we don't have a helipad. I don't know. I'm coming up with barriers that I don't even know what exists basically, but we really don't, I don't doubt you a bit, but how do we quantify that it happens every day or once a month or?
I think that would be a great project. It's just trying to figure out, like, even if you did it as a pilot with a few centers who are willing
Right.
to do
I
that.
think,
We probably have a little bit more power to at least try to understand this in the 3s and 4s first,
Okay.
and then.
Do the 3s and 4s express that concern?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We see the
Yeah.
delay. Right now, the data that we do have, which I reported out to you guys, was only 25% of all the hospital 1 to hospital 2. It's like over 5 hours to get.
But I think
But
we have
is
to-
that related, excuse me just one second,
Sure.
is that related to the hospital A, the transfer E, getting somebody to accept?
We
or
don't
is-
know. We don't know that
Okay,
yet. yet, but
Okay,
we're just-
so
we're
it could be
getting-
4
we're getting
hours
it.
to get somebody to
Yes.
accept and then 30 minutes to find a transport
Yeah.
means, or vice versa.
Like Liz said, it's easier, we've got a captive audience for the threes and
Right.
fours who are verbalizing.
Well, maybe that's
that.
where you
Let's find a
start,
way for
like you
them
said.
To find, to capture those 5,000.
And then
Yeah,
the
they're
ones
already
for
on it.
2s,
Right.
we're supposed to be following up with the 4s, and like Courtney's facility, they're waiting for feedback and they're not getting it, so nobody's holding up their end of the bargain, so we gotta figure out how to get the 2 back talking again,
I'm
That's
sorry.
working a little better now. That is working a little
Yeah.
better.
Well, I think too, we gotta take into consideration, just coming out of the pandemic, obviously, hospitals finding beds has been a big challenge that wasn't there 4 years ago, or not as bad, I won't say it wasn't there.
I think it was really bad before the pandemic, and
And
the
then-
pandemic
I
just
think
made
it's
And
it.
then
still, I
on
think
the-
it still is bad.
And then on the ground provider side, again, staffing, services that were doing interfacility transfers before, because of staffing issues, they're now focused on 911 more so than interfacility.
I think that is more of the problem than
Right.
anything. And again, that's my thought in talking to the folks. Well, one of them might have been investigating is the staffing, and I think attitude to a certain extent. Another one just came down to money. Who's gonna pay for it?
So is there a way, based on what y'all have, that we can look at those 3s and 4s for, y'all pick a region or a quadrant or whatever you want to do that I don't necessarily mean but some subgroup of this look at, this was for 3 months. These were all the delays and this is what we were able to shake out of them. I mean, I wouldn't mind helping with that. I don't know exactly what the piece would be, but it seems like it's broken down into 2 buckets. They got to find somewhere for the patient to go. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah.
And they got to work on transport. And they might be able to work on both of them at the same time, but they might not. I mean, if it's pouring down rain, thunderstorm, and gonna be that way, you can make a quick phone call. The helicopter's number 1 and say, hey, do you think I'm gonna be able to fly in the next hour? No way. Okay, now I know I got to go ground.
We had one of those that we drilled down into like case wise, and that was what the 3 told us, like they had planned on flying a patient, they couldn't, because of weather, they couldn't fly, then they were
Right.
having to wait on the ground crew, so you see this long, it wasn't, that they had gotten acceptance, they couldn't get anybody to transport, but I'll tell you, one hospital that's looking at it realized they were calling one hospital to accept their patient and waiting. And then if that hospital calls back and says, no, we don't have a bed, or we don't have the resources to accept that right now, then you're starting that process all over again with
Right.
hospital number 2.
But how sad is that they have to
Yeah.
spend their time on the
Yeah.
phone?
Yeah.
But to your point about not everybody needs to be rushed there, because you're right, a very small number are really time sensitive. Another point about our exclusive system is that not everybody needs to go to a trauma center. Like, especially during COVID, we were taking up some precious level 1 and level 2 beds with elderly fall patients with head bleeds that went to the trauma center to die, literally to have end of life care. And somehow we have to get non-trauma centers comfortable with that some patients can stay.
Right.
We just went to see that center in Sandersville. They're working with AU to determine what can they use telemedicine for, right? That was a big, you'll see that when the ACS report is finalized, and I'll let you all know when it's posted to the website, is that they feel like we could really benefit by leveraging telemedicine to keep the patients there so that you're not having to run and transfer patients all over your region if they can stay there.
So with the folks y'all are hearing, and Courtney, I mean, you're kind of a lightning rod for it right now. Is there a quadrant in the state that seems to be more problematic than another?
Lee, can I add some here? I can tell you that the biggest complaint of all the hospitals in our region is not somebody, I know we're talking about trauma, but it affects everything, including trauma. It's a trickle down effect, is getting patients transferred out of the hospital. I know for your service, I mean, is staffing the biggest issue with that? Because they told me in our meeting the other day, that's worse than it was during COVID.
Yeah, our biggest challenge right now, helping the smaller hospitals, we do a lot of those transfers, is one, they've gotten better. We've worked with the hospitals to let us know as soon as you can. Don't call us, have you get everything arranged, and now we need you here now. So that's helped a lot, but a lot of it is staffing. It's just quite honestly staffing, and then the delays once we get to other hospitals. We're seeing wall time back it's just growing back up. And that's not necessarily affecting those, because that's a whole different group for us, but we're seeing wall times in our 911 areas just creep back up.
Yeah, and then another issue which is being addressed for everybody in the metro Atlanta areas, you know, the one Region 1 trauma center we have has one spot for a helicopter. And if you talk to the helicopter crews, you know, they're having to go in and then till that one clears and they come in and land or ground, but Grady is now building another helipad, so at least have, you know, 2 spots. So that will help with the helicopter availability, because it has become where it can be difficult as well.
Yeah, the problem for us is, you know, most of our facilities, when you're transferring critical patients, do you want crews that run 911 calls on a regular basis? Or do you want a dialysis crew that maybe checks a blood pressure?
Yeah.
It's the extent of patient care they give. You want them doing transfers. So then you're limited to who. It's not a matter of you just don't have NET providers, but you have qualified NET providers. And like Lee said, I mean, I've got some of our hospitals are hollering about doing a transfer out, and yet they've got 3 of my trucks holding the wall in the ED. And I'm like, okay, well, release my guys and we can do it.
You know, I think that Corey, you know, 6 months ago, you called us out and said it's a trickle down effect, and it's hitting a lot more than it's hitting the whole state. And I can tell you from a 911 provider for my own service is, you know, we're open to taking that patient. The problem is our call volume has got so high that we're running out of trucks. Our people we call for mutual aid, they're running out of trucks, and it's everything is impacting each part of the trauma system and healthcare in general.
So,
Everybody everywhere.
yeah, so we had some good discussion, and I opened the door, and we'll put it back in the next meeting. But there's a key, you know, I mean, everybody here's has brought some good points up from the wall time being, and Scott, your point about call volume. And let's face it, a lot of that call volume should be directed somewhere else. Should never, an ambulance doesn't need to be dispatched.
Yes, sir.
And if you go back and read the 1966 white paper, it talks about that in 1966, about doing that we haven't done yet. So anyway, I'm gonna close this out, but I want us to think about it, because if we do get more money, 1, I want to spend it wisely, and 2, I finally realized there's some folks out there that no matter what you do to try to help them, you're not going to help them. That the help's going to have to come internally, and it might have been Dwayne, might have been Huey that made the point. If they can't make that decision locally that they want to improve, and externally, we're not going to be able to do that, I don't think.
So Courtney, is it worth trying to look at some cases or review some?
Yeah.
I mean, between now and our next meeting, or?
We can pay
Well, I mean,
for our
I don't know what,
cases.
I don't want to create another problem on top of a problem, and I don't know what data y'all have. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, if it's a matter of getting 2 or 3 or 4 of us together on a Teams call or whatever, and looking at 2 or 3 case studies, and if it's one from Scott's region, and Scott can reach out to if they were involved because we weren't available or whatever, we might know the answer. It might have been all staffing, or it might have been they had 15 911 calls and we had a STEMI and a stroke and something else going on.
I'll be glad to reach out to the 3 centers
Yeah.
that I work with and try to get cases to bring back to our next meeting.
So I think that's where we can use our regional representation, maybe a little bit more than we do now, just to find out and to dig into some stuff. To see
If we do that, we need to have a way to collect it
uniformly. Yeah, I agree with you.
Because if you're collecting some data and then you're collecting something totally
Right.
different, then we're not getting anywhere.
But could we, one of the things that we talked about, and I emailed Courtney, because I just became aware of the, what is it, the SEMSO.
It's the model, it's the model guidelines.
Model guidelines. Is that for trauma patients that are in extremis, like, hypotensive, unconscious, whatever. It's like a 10-minute scene goal. So most states have some threshold where if the scene time exceeds X minutes, that's triggered for review. And in many instances, it's appropriate because the patient required extrication or something, but I think like it would be helpful. The trauma centers all have to do that, whether you know it or not. They've set their own thresholds, but like somehow there needs to be promulgated throughout the state some threshold for trauma patients and that would be just a good place to start. That's not even the, interfacility piece, but that's something that you guys directly control, right? I mean, it's something that you can directly have influence over. And if you're not monitoring that, again, if you're not doing what's best practice, then do we want to fund you for you?
One other little point, and I'll go on. We are at least considering engaging Dr. Eileen Bulger, who actually wrote the NINSIMSO guidelines for trauma. And I use those as my go-to protocol, whatever, to write our local protocols. I will tell you, I disagree with her on some of it because we don't take everybody directly to a level 1 or 2 center. But it'd be interesting to have discussions with her. Okay, next on the agenda is the AVLS update. Dr. Tim Boone.
So I'll go through the report a little bit first, and then got Dan Robinson, who's the National Sales Director for Sierra Wireless Semtech, is here with us, and he's going to be able to do about a 10-minute presentation and with discussion with you as well about sort of the future of where this technology is going and how it may apply. And he's very familiar with our use case here in Georgia and rural EMS. And he was a rural cop in the past. So he's got some background that I think it'll be interesting. It's not asking for any kinds of decisions today, but just information that will start getting us thinking, because in the next year or two, technology is going to change and some things like that. We have this report that shows all of the units across all the agencies in the state, and really we don't need to study this now, but you've all got a copy of it. You can look at it in detail by region and by agency and see what's going on. One of the things that you will notice is that more and more of the agencies already, and more since the first of the month, have started putting those vehicle ID, ambulance ID numbers on their ambulances, so that when we see them in the aggregate on the AMM at the state, we can see actually who they belong to. I think that also gives us some idea of which ones are actually licensed 911 ambulances as well, right? So it's all there. It shows what the detail is, and then it's summarized in the other. We can switch to the other report. We've got the summary. That document. So I'll take you quickly through the quarter here. These are just some of the support deliverables kinds of calls that we took in this last quarter, adding units, activating SIMs, CAD integration for the AMM, getting units online, moving units in the AMM, resetting passwords, the renaming gateways, etc. And as you can, so there are a lot of those kinds of calls and stuff that I get in from the folks in the various counties. And then there's been a lot of switch. You'll see the switch to Southern Link, and there's more you'll see about that in a little bit. And then, and of course, RMA and gateways, finding harnesses and antennas for national EMS and so on. So there's a lot of those kinds of things that are going on. Total unit usage by region. Number of active and total and what percent of that's active. I added a little arrow there just to show a little bit about what's going up, what's going down, if it was a significant number. But it's basically the same. It's remained the same from quarter to quarter. 1,181 active units out of a total of 1,410 that are out. Okay. And counties without AVLS, no change here yet. We're still chopping away at talking to folks about that. And hopefully this quarter, we can make a little dent in that. Some of those are going to be not changing, but some hopefully will change. Next slide. Okay, M60 quick reference guide. It's time 1990 quick reference guide. We're in the process of revising that, so we'll have a new version of that out for anybody who needs it the next couple of months. And the airtime, interesting change here. There's been a big shift across the state from Verizon to Southern Link. You see Southern Link has got 564 units now across the state, and Verizon's dropped down to 399. They were up in the 500 and something level. Been shifting there. AT&T and T-Mobile have been sitting pretty much flat.
Hey, Tim, a quick question.
Yep.
I know we talked about doing it like annual open enrollment. Did we
Yes.
do that?
Yes.
Okay, so is that working better?
Hopefully it will when it comes to the budget for the year, because I think we've got it set now. But for example, we had open enrollment up to the end of March, I guess it was, and then it's off. So then there are some new units that are coming on online. That are coming online in July. They are switching agencies in July, but only a couple. The rest of them, this shift all took place in the first part of the quarter.
So in July, some new units are coming on.
No, they're switching units in July. There's a couple of agencies that wanted to switch from Verizon to Southern Link in July. They made their arrangements, they got their plan, they did their research, but they're not changing until the new fiscal year. So during the window of time, they made that decision, but it'll show up on, so for the budget for this next fiscal year. So we should have a known amount of money for each agency for the next fiscal year, so that it can be done with a purchase order that way.
On the slide or two before, you said Chattahoochee County is not likely to join.
That's, yes,
Was there a reason? Because it doesn't cost them anything.
not yet. Old school. Pardon me? Old school, yeah. It's a matter of getting the right conversation with the right people. If you know somebody over there, that would be helpful.
Is it the signal? Is the signal good there? I know that is a very desolate area.
I know it is, but yes, there's good signal
They're
everywhere.
a new ambulance service and they're having some change over. So until they get a permanent director, they're probably not going to put up this.
That's the hardest thing, is trying to pin somebody down who can and will make a decision.
So switching from one provider to the other, and I thought that time was open from December 1st through end of February. Is that right?
Yes, in the March, they had to make a decision during that period of time that they were going to do it for next fiscal year.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what I forgot.
Okay.
I forgot that it was delayed.
I was confused.
And the purpose of that was to be able to provide for budgeting.
Right.
an amount for the next fiscal year that would be fixed.
What do we do? Just email the system administrator? How do we let them know that it was an open enrollment?
Well, I send emails out.
That's
Yeah,
what it
it
is.
System
went out there.
administrators to the regional directors and the RTAC, through the RTACs, everybody.
And we discussed it in our council meeting.
And the carriers know as well, and they know what they need to do. So. All
Why do
right,
you think the change to Southern Link, not that it matters, but why? We see this specifically. You see them, they go to Southern Link, they go away.
The three that you saw right there, the commonality is Plant Hatch.
Well, I'll tell you,
Southern,
we
Southern
switched.
Link has a huge
We've
issue
all
around
got
the nuclear
service.
plants. So I think you see a lot of communication being done to Southern Link. And so you get Tatnall and Toombs are both right there at Plant Hatch. So I think if I had to guess, that's to put all of their communications in one bucket.
Southern Link covers all better.
Absolutely much better.
yeah.
We
So-
never had a major issue, and Verizon used to be spot on.
Oh, I got more calls coming up here today than I used to.
And they just got worse and worse, and Southern Link said, hey, try us again. If we did, we haven't had any issues since we went.
Yeah, so part of it has been motivated by the agencies themselves saying we get better coverage, or we're not getting enough coverage with Verizon or whatever. And in some cases, it's been an influence of the whole county, all public safety going with it sort of motion. So that's the kind of thing we're seeing. All right, so that's where we stand with what we're paying for airtime units. Next. And this is where we stand on the existing $134,000 equipment budget that runs out in June. We had 134,000. We've spent 117,000 of it through the third quarter, and so a little bit left. We should have no problem. In fact, we'll probably be pushing right up to get it all spent by the end of the year. Probably be really close. So there was, you can see like 57 MG90s during the period, and then the various kinds of annual support and the various antennas and so on and so forth that we needed to do. For example, in this quarter in Richmond County, we pulled MG90s out of Gold Cross ambulances and put them in central. They're going into central ambulances yesterday, today, whatever. But we needed to get new wiring and antennas for those to be able to make that work. So we've had the money to do what we've needed to do in doing that. Okay. Courtney asked me to think about money that what we're going to look at for next year and what we might be able to use with any remaining funds that the EMS subcommittee has that you'd like to spend. And there's about $170,000 annual maintenance, which comes due in to Sierra Wireless, that comes due in July for next fiscal year. That $170,000 could be paid in advance in May or June. There's about, when you calculate all this airtime up on here, there's about $600,000 of airtime that we're talking about. Some of that could be paid, given that we're budgeting it now the way we are, could be paid in advance. And there's about $150,000 worth of equipment that we probably, best estimate, that we'll need to replace next year. Should be about the same as this year, maybe a little more, because some stuff is a little older now, another year older. So that's what money we could use. It would seem to me that the easiest thing to do would be to pay that annual maintenance in advance, but that's up to you how you want to deal with that. The other thing I wanted to talk about was we got from Sierra Wireless that they have these APIs on the app, so the APIs on their on the AMM where we track all the ambulances. So we now have those, and that data can be downloaded to servers that we might have any place. I don't know who has those. But my thought was that some of these questions that you've been struggling with, and that there may be a way here to help with that. If you have information in the EMS or Trauma Commission database that says why a patient was in a truck on at a given time, we could match that with GPS data from the AMM that shows where every single one of these ambulances is every moment of time in the state, and how long it took to go from here to there, and how long it sat there, and where it went from next. What I don't know is what was that ambulance doing? But I can show you exactly where it was when it was. And if you took that data, we download it, we can now do that, put it together in a database that some smart computer person could have that could marry that data up. It would seem to me that has the potential to answer a whole lot of questions about the efficiency and effectiveness or whatever locations of ambulance services, at least for the 911 trucks that have this system in. So that has its own other problems, but that data, we do now have those APIs to do that. So we'll do that. And now, Dan Robinson, Dan's from Jacksonville, came up to give you a little look at the future here.
And can I say real quick,
Sure.
in regards to the replacement schedule of devices, do you think, are we staying on top of that? Are we falling behind, or are we doing okay with that?
No, I think we're doing fine on that for right now. And that's the next thing will be the devices we have are going to be replaced by new technology before they wear out. Undoubtedly, that will be the route. So whenever they do start wearing out, it's going to be replaced. And that has its own challenges, but I think there's some potential solutions to that. Dan?
We need just a couple technical seconds here to get this displayed for the folks on Zoom.
So for y'all that may remember this is the time that Courtney would get this big foot locker and he'd start hooking up microphones across the room. We watched that for what, 2 or 3 years, Huey?
I still got that equipment. If you keep pissing with me, I'll bring it back.
You're poking the beast over there.
I just wanted some comic relief for the few minutes of technical, I mean, the few seconds versus hours that we would stretch cords.
While they're setting up, does anybody submit data for this CMS report, cost utilization revenue and whatever?
Manual County.
Yeah.
Emmanuel's doing that this year.
Okay.
And there are, I think, 1 year data available now. And so
What is the intention of all that?
the desire for CMS is to find out what it costs to run an ambulance car.
Okay.
For reimbursement.
Well, that's good because, all other payers follow in line with CMS, so they can get the rate.
The fear that many of us have, though, is that particularly small rural services won't deal down and find out. For instance, the county shop does our maintenance. They don't charge my budget anything, or Nikki's budget anything for hours working on a truck.
Yeah.
But that is a cost to run an EMS. Our medical malpractice is on the hospital blanket. That's a cost to EMS, but it's not in our budget. All of those pieces, the 911, what percentage of 911 calls for EMS, that's a cost to EMS. So there, a lot of us who are terrified that they won't gather all the accurate data. So therefore it will come in under it and we will never get where we need to be.
You're
Hey,
right.
who can respond to the
All right.
chat messages on there, Liz?
I'm not plugged into it, I can. What do you want?
Somebody.
I don't know if they,
Hendricks had a question about changing or open enrollment
Okay,
or not being able to swap right now.
I'll log in, hang on, I don't know.
And Unless the sole provision that I've given everybody is, if you've got a real operational issue, if you got places that trucks aren't getting coverage, we can get something in there, but other than that, it's next December.
He was wanting to know, his question was, to be clear, was it too late to change
He says,
providers?
thank you.
Yes.
okay, so he's listening.
He says,
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Somebody's listening.
Means Al's.
Makes you feel good. Not on me.
But I do think it's important that everybody understand open enrollment occurs every year. It wasn't just
Right.
once and done. I mean, it's just like your health insurance. It's gonna roll around once a year.
Well, good morning, and thank you for a few minutes to be able to talk to the group. And first of all, thank you for your longtime business. We are very appreciative of your business. It's been a true joy working with Dr. Boone over, I guess you and I are going on about 8 years together or so, going back and forth through this program. I will tell you that this is one of the programs that we actually highlight to all our customers that are EMS customers, you know, across the nation and even into Canada. I was just in Quebec a couple of weeks ago and spoke of this program, and I think it's cutting edge. You know, I started at the young age of 18 as a midnight call taker, 911 dispatcher, going to college. Well, we didn't have 911 at the time, but by the age of 20, I became a police officer, and later on a paramedic, and I actually had the privilege of dragging a little hose, but I worked my way back out onto the road, law enforcement, and spent my last 14 years as a police chief in the state of Michigan. Then I ended up here in Atlanta with US DOT, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and I was the public safety coordinator for the southeastern 8 states. And then decided to retire from government altogether, switched over to this side. So it, you know, got a nice pension on the government side, and this allowed me to maximize some income ability. It's always good to go to the private sector. So, you know, kind of with that in mind, I kind of feel the pain. I'm sitting here listening to, you know, no hospitals. You know, it wasn't uncommon in Michigan to get a personal injury accident and turn your lights and siren on and go for near an hour before you got there sometimes. And then you waited for that ambulance to show up. And sometimes that ambulance was ill-equipped, understaffed for what they had to deal with. So seeing a program like this, you know, really does, you know, bring a lot to the community, and sometimes the community takes it for granted. And it really is a big deal, particularly in your rural and remote areas. Are you going to advance?
Yes.
Okay, because I am going to jump around here, so I apologize for that. When Dr. Boone approached me about coming today, I said, well, what's the agenda? And he said, you're going to get up and talk to the commissioners and you know, see what you really want to hear. So you can really direct where I'm going to go. But what I kind of wanted to talk about, you know, it seems like in this industry, you know, change gets driven by the technology that the carriers build out. You know, 4 or 5 years ago, change was driven by the new FirstNet, which is still the new FirstNet today. We're still waiting in some areas to get FirstNet coverage. But it has really done a remarkable job, and I think it's one of the programs in terms of coverage that they have kind of delivered on what they said they were going to do. We're seeing it in most all areas of the country. But you know, here comes T-Mobile with that sub 600 spectrum now on 5G. It does a tremendous job. They buy Sprint and buy up all that spectrum. Now they're doing a pretty good job. You know, I wouldn't have had a Sprint or a T-Mobile SIM card 5 years ago if my life depended on it, and now my family uses T-Mobile. So, Verizon was the carrier to beat for many, many years, and now they're in a knockdown, drag out in competition. So the carriers, the way they come and go and ebb and flow on the technology decisions they make really drives what we do. So we're the largest manufacturer of cellular radio chipsets in the world. So, Sierra Wireless, there's Cradlepoint, there's Digi, there's CalAmp. You go through the list of all the, even Cisco, the list of the cellular gateways and routers that go in the mobility marketplace. Almost 80% of them have our cellular chipset inside. So Cradlepoint's one of our largest customers in this sector. So, most people don't understand, you crack the case open, we're still there. So we're kind of frenemies almost. If you can advance that next page. Maybe. All right, there we go. So what's recently happened to us, not only do we have this 5G change, we have recently merged, we were acquired by a company called Syntec. Syntec's a US company. They're a silicon manufacturer, chipset manufacturer, fairly large one. We have done business with them for many, many years. They have facilities all over the world. They also own a technology called LoRaWAN. And we license that technology to other companies. So Digi uses it, Cisco uses it for different use cases. Our products, we design products that really fit into the mobility market. Police, fire, EMS, Army tanks, personnel carriers, aboard ships, you name it, we're in there. The FBI, the Secret Service, anything that moves or is in, I would say, unusual weather circumstances, because we manage high and low temperature variables very well. And you've all seen our devices. You could pretty much run over it with a tank, and it will probably still work afterwards, most of the time. So LoRaWAN from Syntec is a low power, wide area sensor capability. So I can literally take a little sensor the size of my thumbnail, glue it to a valuable asset. That battery will last 5 to 10 years, depending on what you're asking the sensor to do. And the sensor can transmit up to 3 miles. So now you take your gateways or your routers, and we don't care what router it is. It could be a police car, a fire truck, an ambulance, a utility vehicle, your public works department. If it sees a fix from your sensor, it knows that sensor goes back to the EMS agency, and it begins to triangulate off those gateways using that sensor. So if you put it on, let's say, a life pack, and somebody left the life pack at the hospital, and now all of a sudden some other unknown ambulance service has got your life pack, and it starts showing up, you'll be able to track where that life pack is. So drug boxes, in law enforcement, you can now put a sensor in the buttstock of a shotgun or a rifle, and you're going to know exactly where that's at. So in our world, this technology is going to become a great asset for us. In the fire world, we're doing a project with Cal Fire right now where they're putting fire sensors in the middle of major high-risk areas. And those fire sensors are then transmitting back up to 3 miles to position gateways and sending that data back. So if it detects a fire, some are smoke, that sensor detects that, sends it back to the gateway, and they get an early alert. Because this sensor is going to be out on a pole in the middle of nowhere. So a lot of neat stuff we're able to do with the technology. So that's kind of new to our business, and we'll be rolling that out probably early next year in the EMS fire
So a quick question on that.
Sure.
So if you've got, if you've got that life pack assigned to that ambulance, and it's got the beacon in it, or whatever y'all are calling the device, it's showing it on assigned to that vehicle, basically. I assume.
Right, it's gonna show it separated from that.
Okay, so if it shows it's separated, and there's another service that's running the same gateway, is it utilizing that gateway to
Can
then
use-
say it's pinged off of that?
Especially in Georgia here, where everybody has kind of agreed to participate, yes. But if somebody closes off their gateway. the answer
So
is-
we're using a system called Beware,
Okay,
and we like it, but the problem is we've got a lot of disparate systems.
right,
Just like you've got there, we've got a bunch of disparate, and the beacon system works well.
Yep.
Well, we know last known location, so if it separates from the ambulance, we know where it's separated.
right.
To your point, if somebody picks it up and runs with it, it will triangulate with our vehicles, but it won't triangulate with anything
Yeah,
else.
see, this.
But if I'm hearing you right, your device is, if Huey takes my life
Yep.
back, then it's gonna show it on Huey's truck.
What's gonna
I'm
show
picking
up.
on a friend.
I may say-
Just be clear, I
Yeah, yeah.
borrowed it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, coming from the business, I understand. Oh,
That's why it's got
look at
black
that
spray paint
stretcher.
on it.
That's a nice stretcher. So the answer to that is yes, unless Huey decides he's gonna lock down his service, then yeah. Think of it in another vein. So maybe we do this for the military on other assets.
Right.
You know, they're not gonna wanna necessarily, they want a known gateway that's gonna receive that. They don't want necessarily an outside gateway. So You really gotta be friends to share that data at that point. But in public safety, I think it's a pretty safe bet. You can also put other gateways out into your response area, and eventually that truck's gonna go by it, you're gonna pick it up.
But it's gonna require the newer gateway to be able to do that.
Yeah, probably will not happen on the MG90, and that's where I'm gonna go next, is kind of talk about the history of the OMG platform and the MG90. So if we can advance one more. Wow, I must have really given you a dog runner here. Sorry about that. Let's go through that. I mean, the interesting thing here is, and we can kind of go through, unless somebody's interested in a police use case and how we're doing. I think the interesting thing here about Mississippi Highway Patrol, I'm a longtime friend there that's a colonel and the director of communications. They have used our product nearly 17 years. And they bought, anybody in here remember a device called the Pinpoint 3? It was a small little gateway that went, but it was 2G, 3G. You know, we were talking about Southern Link in Mississippi. They have a carrier there called C-Spire. And C-Spire has supported 2G, 3G forever. So we just last year removed those pinpoints that were 14, 15 years old. You know, and he had 100 spares in the supply room that he never unboxed. I said, well, that speaks well to us. You didn't have to use the spares, but well, that's a real shame that you're gonna have to, I mean, they're just lead anchors at this point. Because outside of Mississippi, you're not gonna see hardly any 3G, let alone 2. So they've moved to our MP70 platform and have about 600 patrol cars statewide, you know, doing CAD, RMS, those kinds of things. Next slide.
So is there body camera running back through that device, the gateway too?
Yep.
And if
It's
it's,
pretty uncommon today to not have police stream that camera footage, particularly if they have take-home cars. You know, the administration doesn't want you taking that car to a precinct and sitting in the parking lot for an hour downloading video. So what most of the carriers have now started to allow is that video will trickle off over cellular all day long while they're working. And it's about 5 gigs. I mean, an active police officer over a 10, 12-hour shift, I'll work 12s. It'll be 5 gigs of video. It's a lot of video.
for some reason, they're not connected to the gateway, does it just store it?
Yeah, it'll store, there's a DVR sets in the back of the car. So I want to talk about Oklahoma, but it's prevalent everywhere. We're doing a project in Miami after the collapse. Some of you may have taken part in that, the Sunrise condominium collapse down there. Oklahoma has a lot of spaces, just like you do here, where they run out of land mobile radio coverage. So they get up in a certain part of their area, hit the push to talk, there's nothing. But they have cellular coverage. We have partnered with Motorola to do two things. That is provide a application called Smart Connect. So if you have a Wi-Fi enabled radio, so it could be an Apex 6500 or 6000, I guess it's the portable, 65 is the fixed. Anything that's Wi-Fi enabled or the Apex Next, if there's cellular coverage and it doesn't see a land mobile radio tower, it will allow that IP traffic from that radio to transmit back into the gateway, use cellular to bring it back to the radio core. And I'm going to tell you, I could have brought a radio today. The latency is just as though you were pushing on the regular radio system. So they're using cellular versus the regular radio system to get back in the core. It's also beneficial if you're doing mutual aid. So a lot of the South Florida guys go help other people and they count on people helping them. The Sunrise collapse was an example where they had responders from all over the world. Motorola issued radios to each and every one of those responders. And we took gateways and strategically kind of connected them together via Wi-Fi inside the collapse. And they could still use the push-to-talk radio as they were working through the collapse. So Miami-Dade really leveraged that technology in that collapse. They also leveraged it at some of their not so popular spring break events where they have some issues. So now they've equipped all their deputies with Apex Next, and we're putting our XR80 gateways in their vehicles. They've always used an embedded SIM inside their Panasonic computer. Now they're moving to a gateway. So they'll actually be connecting their LPR, license plate readers, their video. They use Axon video. We can stream that Axon video. The other thing the gateway allows them to do is actually see live video. So if that body worn goes off and the officer pushes the emergency button, the body worn then comes back using another Motorola product called Aware. They can actually see the emergency alert, see the video that the officers, that's on the officer's chest, and it all comes out automatically just with the push of that emergency button. We also do mobile data tethering, which allows you, instead of using a radio channel to push code plugs and firmware upgrades to the radio, the city of Atlanta here on their radio system, I know Cedric has to take that off, reserve a channel to do updates. For his fleet alone, it's about 8.5 hours. So they have to take a radio channel, and they got lots of capacity, so it's not a big deal. But it takes about 8 hours. It's taking 20 minutes using a cellular gateway in the patrol cars versus doing it across the radio. 1900 baud on a radio on data versus 200-300 meg, sometimes faster. Okay, next. This is just an example. We use Charlotte Fire. Charlotte is now beginning to move to 5G and add some additional Wi-Fi coverage just because of AI objects that they're using. Drones they're beginning to incorporate into the fleet. Some infrared technology they're using when they're fighting the fire. So what does all that require? Additional connectivity. And with 5G, there's significant bandwidth, particularly in a metro area. Next one. Here's my trauma commission slide. And I really tell folks that this is where the ground level EMS folks in the state of Georgia come together with the hospital and the trauma system in general. That doesn't happen in a lot of places. There's some states where a level 1 trauma center, there's only 1 or 2. And they're a long way away from, Mississippi, state of Michigan. If I was in the upper 2/3, there was 1 trauma center. You're a long way from And I live in North Florida. I live just across the border. And the only level one is really Shands and Jacksonville. You got a long way to go from there. You know, so it's, you guys have really done a marvelous job of taking this data, pulling it together. You know, the mutual aid capability you've kind of put together, and you did it very early on. And now with new technology, I think you're going to be able to do more and more. Tim talked about being able to get that location data. Well, there's also built into the gateway GPIO data. So if you wanted to see when the lights came on or the siren came on, or really anything that's on and off, you could just tie a GPIO cable to that device. You can put up to 5 of them, and that will create a trigger inside AMM every time that happens. So not only will it give you a location, but will show the lights were on, the lights were off, and you can marry that then to the 911 dispatch data and get a little better response time picture. Next. Marta, great customer. And a picture of some new trains you got coming here pretty soon. I think the first 2 pair were just delivered. They're getting 250 new. They may change colors 3 times between now and they actually go in production. We're putting 5G gateways, 4 of them on every train car. So 2 of them are to take care of all their needs in terms of operational needs. A lot goes on a train. And then the other 2 are to take care of the 100 passengers that could be in there during rush hour. And it's funny, it used to be a passenger wanted to connect their iPhone and they would just, or a computer, and they'd be fine. Now, the average passenger connects 2 devices, if not 3, sometimes 4. It's amazing what people connect while you're on a train. And then their new electric buses, we're putting 2 gateways on those. Next slide. Miami-Dade, I already talked about that. This was a big psychological change for them to move away from, oh, I can take my computer anywhere I want to go and talk. Well, you know, as long as they're within 800 feet, 1,000 feet of that patrol car, they can still work on their computer without a SIM. So they're going to put a lightweight SIM in the computer just in case, but the heavy data will be in the patrol car. So that was a big shape, this big change in their procedure and the way they do things. Next slide. We get utilities, you know, Georgia Power, Alabama Power, Mississippi Power, Duke. Duke is our largest utility customer. They have about 80,000 gateways in the field, from everything from line management to their trucks to you name it. And then every meter's got a SIM chip in it, a low power, lightweight SIM, so that we can make sure that the power company knows exactly how much power you use every day, so they can send you that bill every month. I know they don't fail me. So we're in that business, automotive. We're about 80% of your cars. So if you have OnStar or something else that needs connectivity, or the manufacturer wants to push updates, we do that as well. Next slide. And I kind of talked through the Duke case. We can go scroll to the next one. Now we're into Tesla uses our devices at their chargers. Electrify America. I mean, that charging industry has been just a land office business for us, you know, because they just keep building them and they need something to handle the billing, manage the status. And they want to be able to repair them remotely, so they can do that through the use of the gateway. You know, video surveillance, highway signage, agriculture, we're doing tractors now. Yeah, I grew up in Michigan on a farm where you learned how to run that row and keep it straight. Now you put a gateway in the tractor and they'll do it for you. Yeah, so smart lockers, you name it. So Amazon's also a big customer. Next slide. So products, this is where I wanted to get us to. Next one. I'm just going to go through these. I don't think there's. You can go ahead and hit the next one. So today you have Airlink, we call it Airlink Complete, but that's really the AMM. That's a shift where we're, the last AMM instances are going to be just for MG90s right now. But AMM is going to move to ALMS, and our entire platform will be on ALMS. So we're highly investing in ALMS. It's a cloud-based application. It sits in Amazon's cloud service. It's as intuitive as AMM, but it's got a lot more power, and we can make changes to the operating system much faster. Where on OMG, you guys would come with a change, it could take a 6-8 month. I mean, it's an older platform. It takes 6-8 months for us to make a change. We can make a change in our Airlink Complete platform and our new AOS for our devices in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. Sometimes overnight, we can make a change and then test that change. So we have 2 new gateways out now, the XR80 and the XR90. The XR90 would be just like the MG90 you have today, 2 Wi-Fi radios, 2 cellular radios, or 1 cellular radio. You can buy it either way. If you didn't need the second Wi-Fi radio, the XR80 comes with 1 Wi-Fi radio, 1 cellular radio, but you can see this has looks like a wing on it on the side. That's field upgradable. So if you wanted to put that second cellular radio on there, it's 2 screws bolted on. It self-recognizes, put a SIM in it, and you're off to the races. You got a second cellular radio. So you don't have to buy 2 unless you somewhere down the road. Where this comes in handy, Tennessee Highway Patrol is an example. I may be a trooper assigned to Metro Nashville area, and now all of a sudden I get transferred to East Tennessee, and I'm up in the mountains. And I got a little bit of Verizon, I got a little bit of FirstNet. I need both. They can just add that second radio for that trooper, put the Verizon SIM in it, and now they can go back and forth. And that'll switch in millisecond switching. So it's looking for the highest available network, boom, boom, make the switch. The operators of the system don't even know what's happening. Next one. So this is a view of the XR80 and the XR90. So this is the what we call the expansion, cellular expansion cartridge. As you might look at that, there's a lot of different things we can do with that cartridge. So we're looking at other ideas, maybe it's just adding more Ethernet ports, or maybe it's adding a high power antenna system instead of putting it all up on the roof for the next tree limb to hit. You use the standard antenna on the roof and you put all the high power stuff in the expansion module. So there's a lot of things we can do with this. It does use 5G and it uses Cat 24G. So the MG90s are Cat 12s. So that's about 600 to 1 meg of download speed if available by the carrier. Not many carriers are doing that in 4G. 5G, there's a lot. And here in town, you're going to see 400, 500, 600 meg fairly regularly. We've seen speeds up to 1.2 gig. And that cellular radio is capable of 2 gigabytes. So pretty fast download or downlink and uplink speeds. 2 gig also on the Wi-Fi. So it's Wi-Fi 6 instead of Wi-Fi 5 that you're used to using today. So 2 gig on that Wi-Fi, it just screams. And then the Ethernet switch is 5 gig. So this device is built to get us out again another 10 years. That's really, we want to build them 7 to 10 years out. This is the new platform. Next slide. So you'll see on the back all these strange connectors. Everybody has experienced this. Getting in the back of the truck, reaching in the back and trying to turn those little connectors, those SMA connectors on with the antennas. We switched to what we call a factor connector. So the antenna's got a color matched pair and a design matched pair. So you take the purple one, and it's got to go on one of those four. You take the blue one, it's got to go there. You take a yellow one, it's got to go on one of those. So you can't put it on the wrong, and it just snaps in and clicks. If you want to take it off, you push the tab down and pull it out. Much easier for install, service, and repair. Next one. This is the XR80. I think we can go to the next one. So the antennas. Not as big a deal on a fire truck or an ambulance, sometimes on the ambulance, but this is the dome. And it looks like an upside down cake tin. Exactly what it looks like. It's ugly. I'll be the first to admit that it's ugly. But it has 4 cellular leads, 5 Wi-Fi leads, a GPS lead. It's amazingly loaded with technology. So one antenna will cover the entire 5G spectrum and 4G spectrum. And this is tuned to those devices. We can also do a shark fin, but it's a dual shark fin. So not real pretty either. Most agencies are putting them on a corner or off to the side, you know, away from the light bar. Again, we get more pushback on the police side than we do anywhere else because the look of the car is a big deal to some of the agencies. On an ambulance or a fire truck, you can hide it. Excuse me. So we're coming out with additional antennas, but because this antenna's got a lot in it, it has to have a little more footprint. Okay, next. RV55, that's our smallest unit. So I wouldn't recommend that for an ambulance service, especially with patient telemetry and those types of things. If you just needed to put it on a pole and stream some video back or put it in a substation just to get a Wi-Fi connection, it's a very good device. Next one. RV55 Cat 7. Excuse me. These are kind of parking lot type devices, uplink centric applications, really wouldn't be in the fire space very much. Next one. And we can go past that. And everybody knows the MP70, at least some of you, and I think in the room use this. It's our workhorse. The MP70 has no end of life announced. We have thousands in stock, so we're ready to deliver on those. That brings me to the MG90. What's next? That platform, we have not announced the end of sale or end of life. And this is how we generally work. When we announce an end of sale, we'll give you like a 6-month notice that the last sale date's going to be 6 months from now. Then it's usually 3 years after that. Can sometimes go up to 5 years because with this product's warranted for 3 years out of the box. So we got to cover support for 3 years minimum. But if you buy an extended warranty for 2 more years, that end of support really goes out 5 years from the date of the sale. So if anything happened, if we announced end of sale today, you'd still have about 5.5 years of support on this product. So it's not like you got to make a decision tomorrow. But with 5G coming along, I think there'll be a push to probably put more applications on 5G. I think it's probably wise to start looking at an XR or a 5G type solution as you begin to buy more. So then you're not running up against that 5.5 year window and going, oh God, we got to make the switch overnight. If you kind of feed the bear as you move along over the next 4 or 5 years, it's not quite as painful. So I don't think we'll see any kind of end of sale this year on the MG. There's nothing I see from the company for next year. I think it's going to happen next year probably, but that's my gut telling me from what I see and how the products are. Let me open it up to the floor. I've done a lot of talking and haven't given you all any opportunity to ask any questions.
I have one for you.
Sure.
That is price point of the XR versus the MG.
It's within $100.
Okay.
Actually, the XR80 is a little bit less. And there's applications, I think, here in Georgia where you could go to that XR80 and not put yourself in a.
And the other question is, it has a different cloud location. So,
Same location,
well, but a different software.
different
So-
software.
So the AMM right now with the MG90s, if we had some trucks that had XR80s, is there a way for,
Them to talk together.
yeah, to.
Not at this point. Most of us in sales are saying, we gotta figure out a bridge. I suspect there will be one eventually. But right now, the focus is on building out the platform, and then they're gonna figure out. Most agent Marta's one of them, so they're testing, they're a big MG90 house, they probably have 2,000 units. But they're testing XRs right now. And they didn't find running two different platforms was problematic. It could be a little more problematic for you, I think, because you need that mutual aid data on occasion, and you'd be looking at two maps. I think we could easily merge the maps together, because both platforms have an open API system on the back. So from a mapping standpoint, we could merge that fairly quickly, and probably in real time.
So for CAD connectivity, that could work.
Oh, CAD's no problem at all. We're gonna send that GPS to whatever CAD servers out there. Yeah. All our devices can do that.
So to move a device from an 80 to a 90, what's the rough cost for that, for the bolt on?
Oh, the little cartridge is about $500. $500-600. Don't hold me to that, but it's.
No, just general idea.
Yeah.
I'm sure
I mean,
it's more
it's another-
economical to buy the 90 to begin with versus bolting on.
Oh, yeah. But you also really, in a lot of places, you're
need
never
it.
gonna use it, So for those customers, kind of gives you that flexibility.
So Tim, have you thought about that as when we go to that, as the next key platform, or will you be pushing people towards the 80 or the 90? Have you thought about that?
Haven't decided.
So this-
Input.
This was gonna be my surprise to Tim. He probably, because I haven't shared this with him, but what I'd like to do is get a couple volunteers where we could plant an 80 and a 90 in a couple different locations and start to work them in a test phase. And it could be bench testing or field testing. We'll help you do all that. But if you're interested in doing that, I'll make 4 devices available for the commission. And you guys can test those over the next year and kind of get a feel for, and your feedback would be invaluable to us. So, and those would be no charge devices.
So we could put one in the city and one up in the rural.
Absolutely. I'm not going to take up the rest of your agenda. I know how valuable the time is. But if you have any questions, I'll be in the back. I have my card. Many of you, some of you I've met before, so please don't hesitate to call. We'll be more than happy to help.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it very much. Next up on our agenda, the GIMSA update, Kim.
Yes.
Y'all, I apologize. This will be the second part that I cover, but that I apologize for the poor quality. My ink cartridge was running out, so I think you can see all the information on there. But it's a 3-page document. And I do have the digital format too, that we'll send out to you. Corey, thank you for allowing us a chance to come in and give you an update on where we are with funding. I'm going to go through this pretty quick, so everything pretty much is in detail. Okay, so go to the first slide. We'll go through the classes that we have and where we are in the process. with those classes at this point. On the trauma skills lab, these are the labs that we've conducted in this fiscal year. And if you'll notice the way the grids are set up, we have the locations for each of the courses, the number of students that were on the beginning roster, and then the number of students that successfully completed the course, along with, we're tracking now all the contact hours for these courses. Trauma skills lab, you see the regions that we covered there as well. We're continuing to do those courses at this time. Next slide. EMR EMT program, we had 67 grants that were awarded. 17 declined those classes after being awarded for various reasons. 26 of those courses have already been completed. 7 courses, according to our records, should be completed at this point, but we're waiting on replies from the instructors. And that's been a little bit of difficulty with some of this, is that it has been a challenge in trying to get instructors to respond and get us beginning rosters, ending rosters, so we can complete our documentation. So it's been kind of a constant reach out and touching these instructors to make sure that we're getting the information from them. We have 18 courses currently that are still ongoing. And a breakdown of those in the next slide, you'll see, I had a typo up there, but you'll see on the color coding on this, the green classes are the classes that have completed. The pink classes are awaiting an instructor or instructor information. The white classes, or ones you see white highlighted, are the ongoing classes. And then we also have a number that are highlighted in gray, and those are the classes that have declined at this point. Next slide, as we go through those. See, again, distribution over all regions.
When they decline, do they give you a reason?
It's various. Some of them, they have not been able to work out the schedule to be able to complete the class. We have had a lot of them that have responded back that they could not find an instructor. So we've tried to work with them to either locate an instructor or, again, try to do something in a multiple county situation where we can combine efforts there. But it's a lot of times what happens, I think, when the grant's awarded, a period of time goes by, we don't hear anything, and it's sort of fallen off their radar. And then they get into a crunch to be able to get the class done in the amount of time that we've given them. And again, next slide is just more of those courses. And what we've done, where we have found that people have actually outright declined classes, we've gone back in and we've tried to award those to other areas. We do have services throughout the year that reach out to us and say that they're in need of one of these classes. So we'll try to backfill all of those when they come in. But it's sometimes our problem is that they wait till the last minute on letting us know anything, and we can't use that money and get it out to another service. But so far, every application that we've received on the EMR EMT grant, we've been able to actually grant them a course for everyone that's been requested. Any questions about EMR EMT? All right. Another program we have, the EMS instructor preparedness. We've conducted 2 of those courses, one held in Doherty County, February 20th and 23rd, and then one in Morgan County, March 6th through 9th. Again, you see the number of people that had signed up for the course, 16, and both of those cases completed it. So we do get a lot of requests for that course also. Axioms of leadership, most recent, we had a class completed in Morgan County, and then both of them have been held in Morgan County. One of the reasons for that, we actually find facilities that really work well with us on trying to put some of these things on. Hard Labor Creek has been one of those facilities that has made it very easy for us to work with them. It's easy to get people in and out, and a lot of people see it as a disadvantage a little bit because there's almost no cell phone service when you're in the park at the meeting facility. We don't really see that as a negative because it allows us to have their undivided attention. So we've used that facility a good bit for Axioms and also for that instructor techniques class. Tactical emergency casualty care. Well, let me go back to you guys get the slide. Yeah, IMT courses. We awarded 31 courses across Georgia. 4 declined courses after awarded. 18 have completed, 9 still in progress, and we are attempting right now to re-award 4 of those courses. And that covers everything from PHCLS, AMLS, EPC, that's all of our NANT cadre of trauma courses that we offer. And in a lot of those courses, what we're doing, in fact, I'm leaving today to go actually do an affiliate checkoff for another training site that has 2 course coordinators that they're going to be pulling in. So that just adds to our cadre of instructors that we have across the state to be able to conduct these courses. Then tactical emergency casualty care. Again, I think I've mentioned this in some of our previous sessions. You do see that we go to some of the same counties repeatedly. There's a very specific type of facility that you have to have for TECC if you're doing that day 2 module where you have your scenarios, and not every service can provide what we need in that. So we try to, again, we're adding on a couple of different training sites that we'll be using in this upcoming fiscal year. Been having to get that approved through NANT, but that is why you see some of those you see from counties on there. But we are, in all those situations, we're bringing in people from multiple counties into those training sites. Our medic course, I think all of you know this has been a very popular course, and we always have a big demand for this. Again, we have completed, see the courses that we completed there. Also, we have 3 more courses coming up, 1 in May and 2 in June that will be completed to show up or to finish out this fiscal year. We are in year 12 of the leadership program. With this year, we received 52 applications. 22 participants were selected. We completed module 1. That was held in March at Georgia Southern, and 100% attendance on that. Module 2 will be held in Rome the week of May 8th. Module 3 is scheduled for August, and module 4 with their graduation will again be back at Georgia Southern in November. Again, good participation. I think we had all of the regions represented in this course this year. One of the things, Corey, that you and I talked about, and that we've had some questions about, and this might be a topic for later discussion, but we have those services again that want to conduct the EMR EMT programs, but there's been some issues with going through the 911 service in some of those areas. So that's something that we get a lot of questions about, and wanted to bring that up as something as a point of discussion for those services out there that could conduct those multi-county classes. Again, putting as much of as much of that information out there as we can, but there has been problems with some of the private companies and having to contract that through the 911 service. So I just bring that up as a reminder about that discussion. Also, we have some other programs that we have not funded in the past, but same things that we have ongoing work on. One is the junior leadership class that we had conducted. There's still a need for that. Again, the ropes course for EMS, the instructor workshop, and let me tell you a little bit about what I mean by instructor workshop. We have an established cadre of instructor that we instructors that we use for a lot of these courses. But one of the things that Kathy and myself have talked about is that we would like to go back in and do, we do debriefings after a lot of these classes, but I think that it's important for us as you use the same instructors over and over again to go back to the basics on some of it, talk about standards, talk about professional practice, some of those things, because I think that it's easy to get into an environment, you get a little bit lax with what you say, and we live in a time that you have to be cautious about what you're saying, the group that you're presenting to. And I think it's just a good reminder about how we need to conduct ourselves in these courses. So I wanted to do some type of update where we bring all of the instructors in and sort of explain to them what our goal is and kind of how we want these courses conducted. That would also be, that's a 1 day, probably no more than a half a day session that we would do on that. EMS, the conference, that I'm not sure, I think we may have doubled up on that. I think we were talking about combining those to make a 1 day event. Also peer counseling, Arbinger training, trauma equipment grants, and then adding additional trauma skills labs. And that is the update on where we are in this quarter. Does anyone have any questions about our courses?
I'm gonna make a suggestion that when you do it, Kim, do a summary slide.
Do a summary slide,
And-
contact hours and everything. on
And
there?
here's the thing about how many different courses y'all awarded.
Okay.
because I know you awarded, what, 67 classes,
EMRNT.
and then you've had so many PHTLS and this kind of stuff. Be interesting to see one slide that says this is how many total classes how much work you're actually doing.
Okay,
Because I know you're here, Kathy's there, and I know you are doing a lot of work. And going through the individual slides, sometimes it's hard for my poor brain to add all those things together.
Okay.
But it is quite compelling what we're being able to do with the monies that we've got.
one other thing I wanted to bring up
Are you
too.
running away from home?
I am, I apologize. I've got a hospital finance meeting at noon. I have to do that.
This is more fun than a hospital finance.
Wait a minute, you bought a bag of M&Ms and then you leave?
Nobody asked.
How does that work?
I was prepared.
Liz, did you not train him better?
You said, "No, it's all right, it's not more fun."
You mean later?
Dad, I up that.
We don't care if you leave, but leave him in there.
How'd you like?
You know when you love, Julie, you know when you love.
Courtney, one thing also I wanted to bring up is, one of the categories that you didn't, or one of the slides that we didn't put in there was about EVOC. We have run into a little bit of a glitch with EVOC, and the problem is that the curriculum that we have been teaching in that program has actually been underwritten by McNeil and Company. And we have added a lot to, it's one of those situations, kind of like the NA&T curriculum, that you can add to it, you just can't take away. So we added a lot to what McNeil was actually offering with the EVOC training, mainly in what we were doing with the cone courses and some of the day 2 type scenarios and things that we were going through. We now have run into an issue with McNeil that because of the change, the things with the NFPA standards, they want us to separate out ambulances and fire apparatus, which doesn't do us any good because we have, of course, fire-based EMS services. We can't go in there and say, okay, you can come, you can't. So what we did is we actually conducted a meeting during our leadership conference and talked to another company about underwriting the EVOC curriculum or what they could offer us. Kathy and I have a conference call with them on Monday, so we feel like that we may have an option for that, but it's not a quick turnaround. It's not something that we could do to finish out anything in this fiscal year. So what we're asking is it a possibility for that EVOC money that's sitting there to be used in some of the other programs that we know that we can award more trauma courses, or we can add to more of the trauma skills labs using that EVOC money and not specifically use it for EVOC until we can get this worked out.
I don't know that there's any reason why we can't, but I would certainly entertain a motion from somebody just to make sure. I think in the past, we've given y'all some pretty broad latitude about moving money around as long as it's in the education bucket. So I would entertain a motion to allow them to use the EVOC monies that can't be spent for that to another line of education processes.
I make a motion to allow the funding to be moved into other courses.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to second that would give them the freedom to spend that money that was designated for EVOC that they can't because of the change in the McNeil platform we use for other education. Got a motion to second. Do I hear any discussion? All in favor will be.
What's the amount of it? Just so, do you know?
I don't know, Liz, off the top of my head. I'll have to look at it.
That's okay.
I don't know off the top of my head. I should have looked at that. But, and just to clarify too, this is not doing away with EVOC. We're working diligently to get that back online. It's just, we know we can't get that done in this fiscal year.
And do you have an idea which courses it would be moved into, or does it just depend?
It would
on-
probably go more into the trauma courses. We've had a lot of people reach out about, especially EPC, within the pediatric hours. So I would think that it would probably go more into the trauma courses line item. The trauma skills labs, that's pretty much where it needs to be. But I could say that AMLS, EPC, we've gotten a lot of requests for those courses over the last couple of weeks.
Okay, so the card courses, so
Yeah.
to speak, okay.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor be aye. Any opposition, same sign. I declare that the motion has passed. So you brought up one other thing, and I was gonna bring it up later, but I think we can go ahead and clear that up while we're talking about it. This was brought to me at the leadership conference, some difficulties some of these services are having. And what we're finding is, or what was brought to me was that the ambulance service has been given a grant to do a class, to do an EMR class, for instance. So they go to the county government to accept the grant, and they go through the processes of dealing with the county government, and they get the grant, and now they've got to hire an instructor. They've got to go through all those processes. The county's got to hire. There's a lot of paperwork involved in it, back and forth, particularly when you're dealing with county governments. So it was brought to me, is there a way that we could facilitate that? And it took me a day or two to think about it, because I don't think too smart. But what my suggestion is that we allow a county service who got, or any service, I shouldn't say county, but any service that got a grant for an EMTR class or any of the classes, that if they wanted to, they could sign an agreement with the instructor or the instructor school, so that the instructor school would then build GIMSA directly for that course. It would have to be approved and signed off on by the local entity, the local 911 service. So they would still be, in effect, responsible for the quality of that course. But it would streamline the financials for a lot of these services. Does what I said make any sense?
How would the 911 sign off be evidence, so that if Kim has to like show us, or that whatever, do you do that? Is there a
We do.
process for that now? Okay.
In my opinion, it would be done along the same lines as what our variance is done now, where we
Okay.
actually do the variance, where they can actually take the cost of what the jump bags would be in an EMR course, and they can use that toward the increased amount for the number of hours for the instructor to do an EMT class. We would do it the same way as some type of affidavit variance or something that would have to be signed off with the grant.
Okay.
So my suggestion would be to have a contractual arrangement where the 911 service and the school would have a contractual arrangement, and that would be notarized by the appropriate people and sent to GIMSA. So, and you have it in your records. Is that reasonable? So if anybody agrees with me, if y'all, somebody will make a motion, okay, I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. So I'm gonna restate the motion that I tried to make. That the individual services that have been awarded education contracts could subcontract with a qualified school or vendor to perform that education, and that they be allowed to bill GIMSA directly. Any other discussion? All in favor would be aye. Any opposition, same sign. I have one other thing on my agenda, and it may not be an item. We have had some folks call me and said that they want to do the EMR class instead of the EMTR. EMTR. Before E, except after CT, except if there's a P involved, the nature of our industry. So they would like to do the 50-hour DOT EMR class with the grant. In the past, our rule has been that it has to be approved by the state office of EMS. I don't know that they still approve EMR classes at all. My motion would be that we would allow folks who just wanted to do the EMR class to be able to do the EMR class.
Would it be a reduced amount, or would the amount be the same?
Yeah, I think it would have to be a different amount.
Yes.
I'm not trying to encourage people
Right.
not to do it.
No, I got you. There's a lot less work involved.
Kim, do you know how many folks? I know Emmanuel went ahead with an EMT. How many are actually doing an EMTR versus an EMT? Do you know?
If I don't have it right here, I can get it for you.
So the only difference will be that they're just not getting the license.
Well, they wouldn't have to do the extra hours. They would not, In Emmanuel County, the license doesn't mean anything to the local fire department.
It really does.
And see, we have taught it in the schools, we have taught it for the churches, we've taught it for industry. Doesn't mean anything to any of those people to learn to drive or to learn the laws, regulations, how to do a trip, none of that. So it becomes an impediment, really. Of course, it hasn't so much in Emmanuel lately because all we've been doing is the EMT classes because of staffing issues.
Well, I can tell you how you can, Katie, if you can go back to the slides that listed the EMT, EMR classes. And I do have this that we can send out to you, but if you notice in the second category in each one of these, and I can do a summary and send it out to everybody, but it shows you right there, EMT, EMR, which ones are.
Okay.
So it's in the slide.
So the one that says EMR, that was EMT, not just EMR, correct?
EMR is the national course, EMTR is just the state license.
Right.
They're the same thing.
And we cannot approve an EMR course that does not meet the guidelines. Because if they take an EMR course that is state approved, it gives them the eligibility to take national registration. And we can't approve an EMR course that does not meet the national guidelines. The DOT, I think what Courtney's talking about, if y'all all remember before National Registry started doing EMR certification, DOT put out a curriculum.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that one was used for a long time. Don't know how long ago that one was updated, but DOT has an EMR curriculum. It doesn't meet all of the national standards.
Run that by me again. DOT has a curriculum that doesn't meet the national standards.
They're essentially, the old DOT curriculum was a first responder, is what it was called.
Yeah.
And it's a 40-hour course. It no longer exists anymore. There is no curriculum for it because it hasn't been updated forever. The national standard now for first responder is emergency medical responder. And that falls under the national education standards. So you've got the EMR, EMT, AET, and paramedic on the national ed standards. And so for state of Georgia, we won't approve a course as an EMR course unless it meets the national ed standards. And so, like, for instance, the Georgia Police Academy still teaches a first responder course. They're still teaching based on that old DOT curriculum, which doesn't exist. It's just because they have the master course file. So we don't approve that first responder course that they teach because it doesn't meet the national standard.
Is that clear as mud?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah,
that can get
absolutely.
complicated.
Absolutely. I'm just as clear as that as I was.
So if I heard right, you essentially, they can't take the class because they can't approve the class. Is that
No,
right?
they can take the course. Anybody in the state of Georgia can take a first responder course. It's just not approved by our office and they can't go test national record.
Yeah. So registry still test EMR
Yes.
based on a curriculum that is how long?
However long the state deems. So in order to test national registry, you have to complete a state approved course. And the national ed standards is what we base our timeline and our different curriculum pieces on.
So the state has determined now that they will not approve an EMR class.
For less than 80 hours. We approve hundreds of EMR classes.
Yeah.
Based on the curriculum that
It's
That the state
based on
came
the
up with.
national ed standards and whatever a particular service submits to us.
So is a minimum 80?
Yes. Which,
And Courtney, y'all say, somebody over here said it didn't matter to the fire service. I didn't hear it was, but y'all were saying that there's an EMR class offered for less than 80 hours. And that's what y'all want to teach. Is
the
that right?
initial, yeah, the initial EMR, emergency, what we call the first responder for 100 years, was a 50-hour DOT curriculum. And that's what I would like for us to be able to do.
So that 50 hours is the same 50 hours of the 80. Is that right?
I don't know if you could say that, could you?
you can't say that because the 40, one point it was 40, 50, and then 60. And that curriculum was built, I don't know when the last time it was updated, but somewhere around 15 to 20 years ago. So the National Ed Standards was first released in 2009, and that's when it was EMR, EMT, and AET. So at least since 2009, the DOT first responder curriculum's not been updated, and everyone's been using the National Ed Standards.
So if you, this is gonna be a really stupid question, but this is clear as mud to me. If somebody takes the 50-hour class and successfully completes it, and somebody takes the 80-hour state-approved class and successfully completes that, what's the difference in the two? One can get a license and one can't?
Yeah.
One can test national registry and one can't? So one's a card. But I mean, has one got a card that says they passed it and one's got a certificate?
Well, I mean, again, if they take the 80-hour course, they can sit the registry, and if they don't.
And I don't want to say just 80 hours. Right now, 80 hours is our benchmark to approve an EMR course. We have looked at lowering that. So there's a couple of things on that. One, we've looked at lowering the hours and some pilots and seeing, can our programs be successful? But the other thing to consider there is that, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, the vast majority of our EMR courses are way more than 80 hours. So it kind of makes it.
I know, but you still got to measure it off the minimum, so.
But, and also, we just say that 80 hours includes the CPR certification, the NIMS training, the TM training, and the clinical hours that's required. So that 80 hours is not all classroom.
Basically, what we boiled it down to then is you can still teach in face-to-face the same 40 to 50 hours. And then the student's responsible for the genital adrenal, any clinical that you apply to, the NIM and the TM training. So essentially, the face-to-face delivery that an instructor is responsible for would still be the old 40 to 50 hours.
But as a student or a provider or whatever we're calling these folks once they complete class,
Can they work on the truck?
well, they couldn't. No, they couldn't. But they would have a certificate from the 50-hour class that says a successful completion, Courtney. Is that what they have?
They wouldn't have it from the state because the state.
I know, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
So the department would issue
I think
so that would satisfy the department.
Yeah.
if
Because most of the
appropriate.
time it's the department that's defining what a first responder is
Right.
for their department.
Okay, so that would do that, or they could have a card from the state because they took national registry and then they got a state EMTR license. Right.
Let me suggest we do this. I don't know if it's a critical thing between now and our next meeting. Why don't we ask Richard, if you would, to tell us which hours, if it's an 80-hour class, and I personally think traffic injury management is not necessarily if I'm teaching it to a school teacher, she's not gonna be working on the side of the road. However, if you're teaching it to a firefighter, that's different. I think that's important. So we ought to try to break that down to something that we could say, hey, this is what we would approve. Is that make sense? Would you be willing to help us with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wrote a curriculum for the police academy that ended up at 60 hours. So, yes, I'd be willing to look at that. Because, I mean, personally, I think it would benefit the state better if the classes continue to remain state approved, whether people could get a license, whether they ever wanted to or not.
Yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day, you got people sitting in a class learning things that they have no intention of learning and no intention of dealing with. And I think it's impediment to what. At the end of the day, I want somebody in Oak Park, Georgia, who knows how to save somebody's life, who knows how to do certain basic things. Driving an ambulance is one of them. Now, I'd like for some cops to learn how to drive an ambulance because they drive them like Chargers and wow. So I like firefighters that drive ambulances instead. But anyway, so if it's okay with y'all, we will kind of table this and ask Richard to work with us to see if we can come back with a curriculum that we can hopefully get more of these classes, more people trained. Is that reasonable? Okay, I'm gonna take a 5-minute break. Y'all do it if y'all want to. but I'm gonna take a 5-minute break because if I don't, it's gonna be a problem. And we will come back because we got a bunch of work to do and we'll need to do it fairly quickly. We got $316,669 to spend. Is that right? And 50 cents.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think that was later on the agenda as far as things in the upcoming
Yeah,
months.
but if you've got some things in this year's fiscal budget that you can help spend that 316,000.
Well, I do, and some of it's covered on this, so we'll leave that. We'll come back.
But y'all give me just a few minutes because
We'll start back at 12:15.
that sounds good. So EMS funding update. Essentially, we got $316,669.50. And that comes from two different pockets. One is some reallocated money and one is some leftover money from the equipment grant that was not expended. Does anybody want to know the exact numbers from those two things?
Firework, say reallocate, might be a little
Do what now?
clear. Firework revenue.
Okay.
Instead of reallocate, probably will help.
Okay, thank you. So I know Tim has given us some things that we can spend money on. Kim, did you have anything?
I did, actually, the document I passed out to everybody. I wanted to go over a couple of things about that real quick, because part of it is an update also on if y'all remember, we had funding in this current fiscal year for development of a public service announcement. And part of what our request would be that video actually should be completed by the end of May. And one of the things that we're looking at, obviously, talking about, again, encouraging people to get into the workforce. We also wanted to have a segment on there about the appropriate use of EMS. Not sure how far that will go, but as we're talking about, how overutilized services are by things that are not emergencies, we also wanted to touch on that. Our thinking too is that with everybody talking about workforce, we need to know, I mentioned this to Courtney on a call earlier this week, we need to know where our modern day Station 51 and Johnny and Roy is. Some of you have been around in this long enough that you remember how that show changed the profession. I think before that aired, there were 12 paramedic services in the United States. Within 3 years of that show being in existence, 46 out of 50 states had established paramedic advanced life support services. So we're trying to touch on some of that as well, about what is it that brings people back into knowing about the profession and wanting to get into this profession. So the campaign, the development of the video, like I said, will be done by the end of May. But then again, what we're proposing now is project, the first step would be a digital marketing campaign. How we push that out. That would be through digital advertising, static ads and video options. We would be able to do paid Google searches, social media, digital display, and streaming services. Also, we can target specific audiences, and we would track the analytics of that to figure out what we're reaching. If we need to target it a different way, once we get some of those metrics back in, and then we would be able to track those individuals and how we get them into the system, how we get them into agencies or into training. We want to raise the general awareness of EMS, build and careers in EMS, and the educational opportunities that are associated with it, and attract people to the EMS field. Digital marketing, any type of advertising that you do, I'm sure all of you are aware, is not cheap. So we looked at this, we broke it down into a 6-month campaign and also a 12-month campaign. So you see the cost associated with both of those with that. The next step beyond actually pushing those public service announcements out, and one of the things is I guess I was a little bit misled. Public service announcements that's not a free thing anymore. I mean, used to you'd see advertisements that would come in, on the news at night, and, they were doing it, I guess, out of the kindness of their heart or whatever. That doesn't exist anymore. So that's, again, something that we were sort of taking back on the ability to get things out there without it costing substantial money. Step 2 of that would be, obviously, once we get people into the system, how we make the connection between who we've reached in that campaign and how we get them either connected into state office of EMS, whether that is through a region where they live or that they're interested in working in, or if that's that GIMSA can provide some facilitation of that or serve as an intermediary to connect, to make that connection. So those are a couple of options that we listed out on that. Online training has been one of the things that has been talked about a good bit with this group, and all of you are aware that we have done the virtual platform for the Educators Conference for 2 years, and there was a suggestion to look at that again. We can definitely do that. But one of the things that we ran into is that we were not happy with the quality. We had some audio and some video quality issues of what we did with virtual platform. And we feel like that there are other ways to accomplish that without it being just us doing the virtual platform for conference. Also, we're having to look at this from the standpoint of, we're a business. We have to operate like this, like it's business. So if we are conducting the virtual platform and putting that out there, it definitely is going to have an impact on the people that come to our conference. So I'm just being completely upfront about that. But we do have access to good relationships with several entities that could provide very high quality online training. So that might be looked at as something that we consider as an option beyond doing just the virtual platform. So those are the things that I would suggest as far as from our conversation forward and what we're bringing up as potentials.
You have a comment in the chat box from Crystal. Crystal, if you could unmute and maybe give some more context around this. She says we have 2 ongoing PI initiatives that could use some help. Region 9 has an ATV initiative that could use some help. Do any other of the regions have ideas for regional performance improvement or prevention initiatives? Sorry, that wasn't necessarily terrific.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, I was just, if there were funds, I know that we've done equipment grants and trauma system improvement grants in the past, and I know they've been tremendously helpful for our region to kind of move the needle forward. I just didn't know if there were any other regional needs that perhaps this could help with as well. For instance, actually, we have 3 things that are ongoing. One, we've been in discussions with our Medical Reserve Corps about maybe developing a specialized team that could help with some of these interfacility transfers when there are no 911 ambulances to do that. So that's one project that we kind of have in our pin in that we've been exploring and in discussions with various teams about. Another one that we're trying to move the needle on is specific to traumatic cardiac arrest and getting more information and training out about management of traumatic cardiac arrest as apart from the typical ACLS pathway, and really focusing on making sure EMS agencies have whatever equipment they need to bring them up to snuff with the new NASIMSO guidelines in regards to the management of the critically ill trauma patient. And then the third one, we're really focused on trauma surge management, and really been beefing up along several pathways, our trauma surge response tactics. And of course, we kind of did a little presentation on some of that at EMAG this past week. So, I mean, those are 3 regional projects. I just didn't know if any of the other regions had anything that's kind of cooking that could use some help that would benefit, the regional EMS system in any way.
Region 2 does need, they did mention that their RTAC funding has gone to support their symposium. And now they, with them becoming a level 1, they're just too busy to absorb the RTAC coordinator activities within their institution. So they want that funding to go towards what the other regions are using for a funded RTAC coordinator. So they would like support for their symposium. Is the only other thing I'm aware of.
Lee, you got something from the Atlanta Metro?
Yeah.
Talking about the other day?
And Nick Adams may be on the phone. I think he is, but I think what Jim's has done with the online education has been very cost effective and far reaching, basically. And so I talked to Nick because they've got a great conference. It's actually next week. And it certainly wouldn't be feasible for this year, but potentially start planning for it this year. For next year is bringing that system online for folks that are outside the metro Atlanta area. And the potential exists there. Nick leaves, and Nick, jump on if you're still online, but they believe that it's possible to actually put that on the Train Georgia website. And then that resource will be available for essentially an unlimited time compared to what it is now with what Jim's is doing in their product, which is a great product, but is only available for a limited amount of time. Having 600 plus providers that have to get education, for every 2-year cycle, it amazes me those that still struggle in the last, I was gonna say hours, y'all are more gracious than I was, but a week, yeah, last 2 or 3 weeks, you know what I'm saying? So, but anyway, I just thought that was another option, because I really think what we've been able to do with the funding from the Trauma Commission to the association, and then what the association's done back, I don't remember the exact numbers over the course of the last couple of years, but I think that's been very beneficial. So
Nick says he can't get his microphone to work.
So it's not a yes, absolutely they can do it for sure, but it's a, hey, we'd really like to explore it and do it. And they think they don't know of any barriers that would prevent them from being able to do that.
I know we work with Richard's team to get our regional symposium on the train system. I know that it's a little bit of a heavy lift for them, but they've been able to take our presentations and even our trauma after hours presentations that we do and load them on train as well.
And I think we've got what the association does, what the regional RTACs are doing and the councils and all that. When you look at the education, Kelly, them show numbers, 24,000 roughly licensed providers in Georgia, is that right? And 50% of them are working on a licensed ambulance service, and then the others are first response and other types, things like that. So I think the more opportunity that we've got, the conferences are great, and in person is great, but you can't get 24,000, you can't get 12,000 the conferences. I think the more we can do with education online, that technology's changed since the walk through the woods with Ray Fowler.
You dated yourself.
Yeah, I know I did. Yeah. The VHS in and you go to sleep and all that type of stuff. But I think that technology has really progressed well.
I think I just got my microphone working. I just wanted to, if you can hear me, I wanted to say, yeah, absolutely with Lee. We'd like to try to upload that content to the train for next year's conference.
And there will be a cost to it, but you don't think it's an astronomical cost, correct?
No, we've during the pandemic we did a lot of filming. I don't think it's going to be a lot. We're still looking at numbers. We're guessing $5,000 to set up the video guy and the audio as well.
Any other ideas? Okay, so I got a question. Kim, where's your trigger point? If we fund this, what I'm trying to figure out, we got 2 things that we can look at. We could take this money and fund AVLS up front, the equipment. If you look at 170K for maintenance and 150 for equipment, that comes down to pretty close to the amount of money we got. Am I right? How about that? I might want y'all write that down. Then that would give us time to flesh out all these other things with the money in the next fiscal year. Would that be a killer for anybody?
Can I ask a question? Kim, is there this amount that you have listed down, the 80,000 and 150,000, is that turnkey, that's what it is, or do y'all have other funding that's gonna go towards it as well?
Now, that's turnkey for the digital campaign. Of course, if you see it there, that actually is in what we consider step 1. There's a second element to that is how you make that connection between the individuals that we're actually reaching through our campaign, how we connect them into what we call the EMS pipeline. But yeah, that's turnkey.
Okay. And is that all that you're waiting on now is funding? Is that you said the video's almost done?
Video's almost done.
You're ready to out.
So we just gotta get it out.
Get it out. Well,
So that's
I understand, Courtney, what you're saying, to give more time to work on this. and the AVLS stuff, but the funding for that is gonna be available in the next budget, correct? I mean, as long as we get the funding from
The funding will be there, depends on what this group decides, how they
to
want
do
to
with
spend the
the
money.
money.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm supportive of it. Don't get,
No, I'm
don't
talking about.
misunderstand.
Yes, sir, I get what you're
Yeah.
saying. I mean, I think I'm gonna speak for the people from our region, I'm here representing them, and I'm also thinking, I'm speaking for the state, is this workforce issue, we're struggling. Everybody's struggling to get applicants. The schools are struggling. The high school programs are doing good, but I don't know about where y'all from. When you get them in there and you talk to the people that are in those programs, many of them said they don't ever want to be in it. They just like taking the program. I don't know about it, it's different. I mean, y'all are at it, probably is. But to me, this is a priority that even if we do go the way that you mentioned, I'd like to see us, fund this at least to some degree, if not 100%, because it affects all of us.
I agree.
Is that including the money that's in the proposal for that, Kim?
The proposal that we have are actually, the amount that we have now is for the development of the piece of the PSA. But what we didn't have is we didn't actually have to push out that.
Got it,
I was
okay.
thinking that there was still an availability of getting some free.
Free,
marketing
yeah,
of
I
this,
know, free
and it
is
doesn't
about, yeah.
exist that I know of.
So then let me suggest this. That we spend 170K on the maintenance. Okay. And either the 80 or the 150 on the digital marketing. If we do the
I think the
150,
150, I think it's gonna take a year to see that.
if we do the 150, then that pretty much, that's not the exact amount. So we'll have to figure a few dollars different because that's a few dollars over our total.
I show my ignorance. What do you get for 150,000?
Well, have you done anything with advertising lately? I mean, I'm being.
I mean, we have, yeah,
I had not
so-
until I started looking at this. It is amazing to me how expensive any form of media is.
Yeah, I mean, that's my point is it 4 ads and 3 reasons or what is it?
No, what we're doing is we're taking the time to actually see, and I've got Mary spending a lot of time on this, actually seeing where we're getting the most bang for the buck. Where are we going to be hitting the core group of people that we really think that we're gonna be able to fund with this? Because if we're just putting something out there as a blast and we don't have a target audience, are we really accomplishing anything?
Sure.
So we're taking the time to actually make sure that we have metro, rural coverage on how we're doing this. And actually, some of that even means tweaking it. We do it one way in a metropolitan area, some way completely different in a rural area. But as far as telling you right now what that would buy for us, I can get you some detail of that, but right now, it doesn't go as far as you think it would.
I mean, so to Courtney's point, if I think I understand it, why not? Because I'm for it. Why not fund because the media needs the 300,000, right?
Do what now?
The media needs to figure out where the 300,000 is going to be spent.
We're not under as much pressure as we were because we have the trust fund, but I don't like the idea of us just having money sitting.
Okay, so could you not accomplish what I think you're saying is do the AVLS funding, let Kim get the details, and at the next meeting, it may be $200,000 we need.
And I think to Scott's point is, would that delay your rollout of that plan?
Well, it will, because if we have a campaign ready at the end of May, then we don't want to sit there, for long and not go ahead and be ready to push that out. We're doing work now to see where it would need to go.
And I'm just gonna be harsh. If you don't know where you're gonna spend it now, how are you gonna spend it in May? I mean, the end of May is not that far. It's 45 days. So I mean, if you don't know where you're gonna spend it, how do you roll it out?
I would say don't know where we're gonna spend it. I'm gonna say where we would spend it that would make the most impact.
Okay, and I asked that question back to you. Where are you gonna spend it that's gonna make the most impact? If you're gonna spend it in 45 days. What's gonna happen in 45 days for you to know where to spend it versus when do we meet again? Okay. So 90 days.
Although you're probably gonna have to have a called meeting anyway, because then you're gonna have 24 budgets,
Yeah.
so. You could have a call just for finance, because we're not like, this isn't emergent for the reallocation even, is it? Like we could.
It has
Oh,
to be
you have to be
encumbered
encumbered.
by next month.
That's the easy part about about doing the. It has to be encumbered, yeah. So we're on a short string for the reallocation.
And we spent some money on this before, hadn't we, already?
Yes, we have some development funds
development part.
to develop, and that's what they've been doing for the past, 6 or 8 months.
And what-
Developing
So
the-
to do the
So-
video was only 24,000? Is that all it costs to do do you have the video or?
We'll have the video probably in another week. He's actually been out filming in the last 2 to 3 weeks.
So it would be the same video running over and over for the 150,000, or is there are there different messages? I'm thinking about, and again, it's only on public service, but like Brain and Spine Trust did, which is they're like us, they're attached to DPH for administrative services, and they actually had some like good concussion commercials on public television. But there were a couple different iterations of them, you know what I mean?
Right.
So.
And if we were doing it, especially if we were doing a 12-month campaign, we would definitely do that because you would, I mean, again, you're going to lose people if you're doing the same thing over and over again. And one of the things that we just added in was just exactly what we're talking about, kind of getting in there to define, okay, what is an emergency? When do you do the news? I think that's important as well to try to get that message across.
So does this get you on like Fox, Fox Station 11 Alive, or you know what I mean, what the major?
Yes, part of it would be.
And is this a campaign for recruitment and for when to use an ambulance?
Yes. We're trying to combine that message of when to call an ambulance or bringing something in there about, how to, and again, my thing is that I think that there's still a lot of people going into EMS thinking everything's going to be about a 911 call, lights and sirens, and, they're not thinking about the reality of it. I think that some of this is about, educating the public.
But is that 2 different videos or one?
It's one video,
Okay.
and again, I'm working with this guy, we've gone back and forth several times recently, trying to figure out how he incorporates that in there. And again, it's not easy to cover things when you're talking about how Grady functions in Atlanta versus how they function in Emmanuel County. I mean, it's a completely different person that you're looking at to fill that role.
I think it would help, I don't know, I think it would help if we could see the video.
That will,
And so in this called meeting, upcoming called meeting, maybe we can finalize.
Well, the upcoming call meeting will be looking at the next year's fiscal
Right.
budget, approving that. So, I mean, and I'm for this, but I think I would prefer to wait and see the video, flesh it out, and then vote to have the money then.
But I'd like for
I would like.
her to
y'all-
have that money as soon as.
Yeah, as soon as, well, there's a process of getting the money. We vote to do it, and then the trauma commission votes to approve it.
There's nothing quick about state.
Oh,
money, Jeff.
believe me, I know.
So,
There's no speed
Yeah.
dial for
No.
Venmo for.
I think I understand what you need though. You're needing something to say, okay, we need to know target audience, who we're reaching. You're wanting to make sure that what we're spending is actually going, that we're gonna get the return on the investment.
Yep.
So I understand what you're,
are you good with that?
I'm good with that.
Okay. Scott, are you good with that?
I'm absolutely. I just want to make it, and I think that what you said about the APLS is probably the best.
And I absolutely agree. And I think this is maybe a key to help us recruit people in our profession. Also, the passes that we're doing, I think certainly has to help. So then what I would get back to is my initial thought that we look at funding the $170,000 for maintenance and $150,000 for equipment, which would give us pretty close to that amount.
It'll be like 146, 669. Very quick, man.
So,
That's good.
so that would be a little, that would be how much?
146, 669.
So then we would just drop the equipment back to the amount to flesh it out.
Yes.
Is that fair? So we would use 170K and the remaining money of the $316,000 for the equipment.
I'll have the precise quote next week for the annual maintenance. And then we can tell us the specific numbers.
Then we can true it up to the rest of the equipment.
The equipment will be whatever we can do with whatever the remainder is.
Yes.
But the quote for the annual maintenance, we know precisely next week.
Okay. Yeah.
It's gonna
So
be a little under 170, I think.
having said that, then I would entertain a motion to do that. If everybody's not completely confused at this point.
Yeah. Say it. What do you need?
What I'm entertaining is a motion to use the 316,669.50, 170,000 of it towards the maintenance, or whatever that accurate figure comes out to be. And the residual amount of that money be placed towards equipment purchase in the ABLS program.
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion.
I'll second.
I have a second. Any further discussion?
One quick question for Tim. Are we buying the old gateways or are you gonna try to hold and buy the new gateways?
I think we better think about the idea of putting the test ones in there and see how
Okay.
like them out there. And then when they get a little step further in the next fiscal year, somewhere through the year at being able to integrate the data and tested that out, and we know that it's gonna work, then we might start looking at replacing MG90s with XR80s, but I'm not ready to make that decision yet. I would bring that proposal to you when the time comes that we would start doing that. But then the idea would be to phase them in one at a time that way, as opposed to having to do any kind of a blanket change.
So
Crystal had one last comment. Three comments, sorry. Everyone can push the paid video, or push the paid for video on their free social media pages. So is the video like ready to use now, or people could?
It will be within the next 2 weeks.
And then Crystal, you're full of ideas this afternoon. She must have eaten her lunch while she's sitting. Jemsa could do a watch party launch and then a social media blitz. She says our audience is not on TV. Was it a TV campaign?
It varies. And the digital marketing campaign stretches out over several things. It's Google searches, it's social, it's
Is it
Yeah,
with the,
training services.
is it with a specific agency? It might be helpful to know the agency. Are you guys engaging with someone in particular?
As far as the development of the video, we're actually pushing it
Or
out.
this, or this, yeah, pushing it out, yeah.
The development, no, not currently, but we're working with the guy that's actually developing the video on that, because
Okay.
again, that's
Who is it? Is that like
a guy named Joseph Kelly.
is it a company, like a broadcast, like a production company?
He actually, this is what he does. He develops,
Okay.
he develops videos. He's done actually some work for us before. He did a promotional for Heartland EMS. I think that was about 2 years ago that they had good success with, and we've used it several times.
And the only reason I'm asking is because I do, as part of teaching, after Crystal said that, she just made me think, I do a portion for this National Trauma Medical Directors course, and we talk about marketing your trauma program, and they talk about social media. And if you look at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, while Facebook is considered like a dinosaur, it has the most engaged users of all three platforms. Those people who are on Facebook log in daily, and they're clicking links basically. Instagram is just like a quick flick, and so I don't know, it might be good good to at least dip the toe in the water of the social media, since that's where it's at. And they almost talk about from a marketing perspective that, websites in a way are a little bit dead because people just don't go to website. Information gets outdated really quickly.
Well, we're
So-
pretty fortunate because we get some free consulting services because Mary, my communication specialist, her husband, this is what he does. And he is a digital marketing campaigns that's his career.
I don't see anything else in the chat.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor be aye. Any opposition, same sign. Hearing none, I've declared the motion passed. So I'm going to finish this up very quickly. Immediate transfer to higher care, we've talked a little bit about that. That still is a very dear issue to me. I'm not going to go into it anymore right at the moment. The March pause is still working very, very slowly because I'm a very slow person and I have more irons in the fire that I can keep hot. Crystal, my son is getting married Saturday and I'm not talking to anybody about anything until Monday morning. But I would love to have a conversation with you about that traumatic arrest project that you're talking about and maybe integrating some of that into that March pause discussion. July meeting place. Liz, you had some ideas, I think. We can't meet here. They have something.
Oh, actually, we might still be able to meet
Oh,
here.
then we
Kiwi's trying to work on it
Okay.
for us.
Then we don't
Or-
need
we just say,
To be announced.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To
There's
be
another,
determined.
there's an alternative location here, or Gabby's already reached out to.
Is Athens technical and then just there?
I think Athens Tech's a little too far for you guys, like Dwayne, that's really far for you to go another. 40 minutes up here.
Dwayne is driving a long ways. A long ways.
Hey, I just tripped Athens.
He's got tires that look like Lee's bag.
So,
I feel sorry for you.
so we will be working with Richard to come up with a potential second EMR type class. I don't know what to call it. And Kim, I will make a lot of time available at the next meeting for y'all to roll out this program for us. Is that fair?
Okay.
All right. And I do so much appreciate everybody's time. I know it's been a long meeting, but we've learned a lot and I think we've accomplished a lot. And I wish safe travels for everyone. I have a motion to adjourn. I have a bunch of those.
Second.
I declare the meeting over. Thank y'all.